Welcome to Paranormal M. I finally get to do what I love most. Sit down and share my paranormal experiences with you. How's your day going? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Thanks so much for sending in your own paranormal stories too. Don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos on the channel. Alright, let's dive into today's stories. So, let me tell you a story. I want you to imagine a road by the sea. A real one. No movie filters, no special effects. Just asphalt, salt wind, and those old concrete cliffs that have seen more than they'll ever say. Some places remember things. And this road, this cliff road between the mountains and the Pacific, it remembers. That night, the air tasted like metal on my tongue. You ever notice that? When you're too tired or too anxious, and even the wind feels sharp? The moon was full and heavy, hanging over the black outline of the cliffs. Far below, the waves were crashing so loud you could feel them in your chest more than you could hear them. I was on that road with my girlfriend at the time. My name's Jane. I was 29 then, a little worn down, the way life can make you look older than you really are. With me was my new girlfriend, Rena. Bright, curious, always asking why about everything. She was a few years younger than me, too young to be carrying around someone else's ghosts. We weren't in a motorbike like you might imagine. We were in this old little silver hatchback, the kind where the windows rattle if you go faster than 80. I still remember the dashboard light. One of the bulbs had died, so the speedometer was only half lit. We pulled over at this lookout point, where the road stretches ahead in a gentle curve, and a line of streetlights runs all the way along the cliff. That night they were all on, soft yellow, one after another, like a path someone had drawn just for us. Rena hopped out first, hugging her jacket around her. The sea breeze caught her hair and lifted it just a little. "Wow," she said, turning in a slow circle. "This is beautiful. It doesn't even feel real." I leaned on the car and tried to smile. "Yeah," I told her. "Like a dream, right?" But my voice shook. Just a little. Not from the cold. Because this wasn't the first time I'd stood on that road with a girl who loved me. Before Rena, there was another. Her name was Hannah, and she loved me with everything she had. Maybe more than she should have. Hannah's story ended with an overdose, alone in a small apartment that still smelled like laundry detergent and jasmine tea. The police said it was suicide. Her mother said it was my fault. The neighbors whispered. Our old classmates stared. And the last message she ever sent me, "I'm scared. Are you coming?" reached me too late. You know how guilt works, right? It doesn't just sit quietly in a corner. It spreads its wings and follows you, like a shadow that doesn't need light. Rena knew the basics, that my ex had died. She didn't know about the shouting outside the funeral home. She didn't know about the way I stopped checking my phone after that last message, because even the vibration of a text made my stomach drop. She just knew I was still healing, and she decided to be gentle with that. So there we were, two people in an old car on a haunted road that most people just think is scenic. While the engine ticked as it cooled, Rena tugged on my sleeve. "Hey," she said, "let's take a picture. Look at those lights. It's like they're, I don't know, lighting up our future." She laughed. "That was cheesy. Forget I said that." I shook my head. "No, I like it. Let's take the picture." She started humming this silly tune, some pop song that had been on the radio all summer. Too cheerful for a place like that. And then it happened. The light at the very end of the road went out. We both noticed, but we didn't say anything yet. Then the one before it flickered and died. Then the next, and the next. In less than 10 seconds, everything beyond our car was swallowed in darkness. The sea went from loud to distant. The air felt thicker. It was like the night took a breath and forgot how to exhale. Rena grabbed my arm. "Jen, what was that?" My heart was hammering, and not because of the lights, because I knew this feeling. I'd felt it once before, on the night Hana died, walking into her building. That thick, suffocating silence that somehow already knows what you're about to find. And then the cold came. Not normal cold. Not, oh hey, the wind's picking up. This was bone deep, memory deep, like every regret you've ever had turned into ice and pressed itself against your skin. I stared down the dark road, and I saw her. Something floated into view from the darkness. Not walking, not really moving the way a person does, just drifting. A woman, in a loose white dress that didn't belong to any season. Her hair hung long and dark, strands floating around her as if she were underwater. Her feet didn't touch the ground. My throat closed. "Hana," I whispered, before I could stop myself. Rena stiffened beside me. "Who is that? Is she hurt?" Her voice was shaking, but she still sounded like a person who believed this could be explained. The figure drifted closer, and the moonlight hit her face. It was Hana, but not the Hana I'd known. Her eyes didn't look alive. They looked like accusations carved into ice. She hovered just above the asphalt, the hem of her dress stirring in a wind I couldn't feel. "Jian," she said, voice thin and cutting, like air moving through a crack in a door. "There is nowhere for you to go from here." My body locked. I wanted to move, to run, to throw Rena into the car and drive, but my legs wouldn't respond. Hana's face twisted, not with anger at first, but with a grief so sharp it almost sounded like laughter. "Why didn't you save me?" she asked. My hands were shaking. "I tried," I said. "Hana, I came back as fast as I could." Her stare didn't change. "You told them I did it to myself," she whispered, more venom in that softness than in any scream. "You said I chose those pills, and they believed you." "It's what happened," I managed, though even as I said it, doubt I'd never dared to admit flared inside me. "When I got there, you were already dead," she snapped. "Cold. Alone." The wind surged out of nowhere, whipping Rena's hair around her face, sending dry leaves spinning up from the roadside. Behind us, the car rocked gently. I heard Rena choke out, "Jian, let's go, please, please." But the road ahead felt sealed off. Like if we moved, we'd be driving straight into whatever Hana had become. Hana lifted one pale hand, and the air around her fingertips shimmered with a frost that had no business being in that humid coastal air. Her eyes slid to Rena. "She'll take them too," Hana murmured, "just like I did. And when she does, everyone will be sure of what they only whispered about before." My blood went from ice to lightning. "Don't," I said. I don't even know who I was talking to. Hana, the road, the sky. "I curse your future," she said calmly. "I curse every love you touch. I curse the innocence you pretend to have." She drifted forward until her face was inches from mine. The car's side mirror frosted over with a thin layer of white crystals, right in front of my eyes. And then, every single streetlight snapped back on, all at once. The cicadas shrieked from the trees again, like someone had hit unpause on the night. The wind turned back into regular, chilly wind. The car settled. Hana was gone. Just gone. The road ahead looked normal, quiet, almost friendly. Rena was still clutching my arm. "What was that?" she whispered. "Tell me you saw that. Tell me I'm not crazy." But both of us knew the wind doesn't make mirrors freeze, and power surges don't call you by your name. We got back in the car and drove away from that place. Rena tried to joke about it later, you know? She teased me for believing in ghosts. We folded that memory up and tucked it into the back of our lives like a photo you don't frame, but can't throw away either. Time passed. Almost a year. We went back to our ordinary routines. Movies, street food, lazy Sundays. Sometimes Hannah's name came up, but only in passing, like touching a scar through clothing. Never too long, never too deep. And then one evening, my phone rang. It was late. I remember because the TV was on, but I wasn't watching it. I saw Rena's name on the screen and answered. "Hey," I said. Silence. Not the kind of silence where you know someone's listening. A heavier kind, like the silence on that road. "Rena?" I asked. Something clinked, faintly, like plastic against glass. Pill bottles. My heart stopped. "Rena, talk to me. What's going on?" Nothing. I grabbed my keys and ran. I don't even remember locking the door behind me. The whole drive to her apartment is a blur in my mind. Just red lights and the sound of my own breathing. By the time I reached her place, the sky outside her building had already started to lighten at the edges. Her door was unlocked. The windows in her room were open, curtains moving gently as if someone had just walked past them. The room smelled like her shampoo and something sterile. And there she was, lying on the bed, perfectly still, like she'd just decided to rest for a moment and hadn't quite figured out how to come back from it. The glass of water on her nightstand was half full. The bottle of pills, sleeping tablets I recognized because I was the one who'd bought them for her, just in case, lay on its side, empty. They later said she'd been gone for around 5 hours by the time I found her. Her phone was on the floor, and next to her hand was a note. Not long, not dramatic, just a few lines. "You asked me not to be afraid of losing you. You told me if it ever felt too heavy, I should take these and sleep, and you'd come back in time. You promised you'd be there. You weren't." My vision went blurry. The room tilted. I remember saying "no" a lot, like the word could rewind time if I said it enough. But grief doesn't care how many times you say no. The rest happened fast and slow at the same time. The police arrived. They spoke softly at first. They took photos. They took the note. They asked where the pills came from. "I bought them," I admitted, "but I didn't tell her to. I didn't think she'd..." They exchanged looks. The whispers from Hannah's case suddenly weren't whispers anymore. 2 girls connected to the same man. 2 overdoses. 2 notes. This time, the ending was different. They put cuffs on me. The charge was negligent homicide. The idea was that I had given Rena the means, the words, the reassurance that turned into something lethal. The trial. I won't drag you through all of that. The point is, the judge looked at the evidence, at me, at those 2 stories that suddenly sounded so similar, and then he said, 2 years. 2 years of my life, neatly measured and handed back to me as a sentence. When they led me out of the courtroom, I made the mistake of looking toward the tall windows along the side of the building. The mountains were visible in the distance, and beyond them, barely, the faint line of the sea. For just a moment, in that shimmer of heat, I thought I saw it again. A white dress, moving where there was no wind. Long, dark hair, floating as if underwater. A still face, and eyes that glittered with a terrible, calm satisfaction. Hannah. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe it was guilt. Or maybe some promises, once made to the dead, don't just disappear. Some roads remember, and some things you say, carelessly, in a moment of wanting to comfort someone. "Just take these, you'll sleep, I'll come back," can turn into chains you never meant to forge. So if you ever find yourself on a cliff road by the sea one night, and the air feels heavier than it should, and the streetlights ahead of you shine like little pieces of hope laid out in a row, I'm not going to tell you not to drive it. I'm just going to tell you this. If those lights start going out, one by one, and the darkness comes toward you like it remembers your name, don't make promises you can't keep, and pray, quietly, sincerely, that the road doesn't decide to remember you, too. So, this was back in the early days of the pandemic. You remember that weird, suspended time? Here in Australia, it still felt kind of normal for a while. Borders were shut, but we barely had any COVID cases yet, so life just went on. There was this strange sense of safety, like the storm was everywhere else. One bright Saturday afternoon, I went to visit an old friend of mine I hadn't seen in ages. Let's call him Rowan. He'd moved out to this little weatherboard place near the coast. Not quite on the beach, but close enough that you could smell the salt in the air when the wind picked up. He was living there with his new partner, Eliza. I remember walking up the path and feeling oddly nervous, like I was stepping into a new phase of his life. But as soon as Rowan opened the door, all of that dropped away. He gave me this huge grin, pulled me into one of those 2 long hugs, and suddenly, it was like no time had passed. Inside, the house felt warm and lived in. There were canvases leaning against the walls, brushes in jars, half-finished sketches on the dining table. You could tell they were trying to build a life there, not just a place to sleep. Eliza was in the kitchen when I arrived. She wiped her hands on a tea towel, smiled, and said, "You must be the friend I've heard too much about." She had this soft, careful way of speaking, like every word was being weighed before it came out. We spent the afternoon drinking cheap wine and messing around with paints. Rowan put some old records on, Fleetwood Mac, I think, and the whole place felt sun-drenched and lazy and safe. Every now and then I'd glance over at Eliza. She laughed at Rowan's dumb jokes and asked me questions about my work, but there was this quietness under everything. Not rude, not unfriendly, just a kind of sadness sitting behind her eyes. Later, while Rowan was out on the veranda taking a phone call, she opened up a bit more. She told me about her dad. He'd raised her and her sister on his own after their mom left. Worked late shifts, packed school lunches, learned how to braid hair from a YouTube video, that kind of dad. He'd died from cancer not long before the pandemic started. She pointed to a photo on the sideboard. He was standing in the sun somewhere, maybe a backyard barbecue, slightly heavy-set, tanned, wearing a short-sleeved shirt and this chunky silver watch. He had that half-smile people do when they're not used to being photographed. "He was my person," she said. "I keep thinking I'm going to call him, and then I remember I can't." She said it so simply, but it hit me in the chest. You know when someone is talking and you can feel how much they're holding back? It was like that. I could tell losing him had cut right through her, and the wound was still fresh. That night we ate dinner together. Eliza cooked this simple pasta with garlic and prawns and too much lemon, and it was perfect. We drank more wine than we should have, listened to the wind outside, and for a while, everything felt almost hopeful. I remember going home with a warm buzz in my head and this really good feeling in my chest about the two of them. I was genuinely happy for Rowan. After years of chaos and bad relationships, he'd found someone kind, someone grounded. They had this quiet, beautiful life by the water, and it felt like he'd finally landed somewhere soft. Then the world got darker. You know how it went. Rowan and I kept in touch on the phone for a while. We'd say things like, "We should catch up again soon." But soon kept slipping away. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. We drifted, the way people do when life goes strange and heavy, and everyone is just trying to get through. At some point, I realized I hadn't seen either of them in a long time. One afternoon, I had to go into a shopping center to buy groceries. This was during that phase when everything felt half abandoned. Most of the shops were closed, lights dimmed, no music playing. Just the squeak of trolleys and the occasional announcement echoing over the speakers. The place felt haunted in that very ordinary pandemic way. I was walking down this long corridor toward the supermarket, the kind with all the shuttered storefronts on either side, when I saw someone coming toward me in the distance. It took me a second, but then I realized it was Eliza. Even from far away, something looked off. She was really pale, almost gray, and her eyes were wide and unfocused, like she hadn't slept in days. She walked like she was on autopilot. No phone, no bag, just her arms loosely by her sides. As we got closer, I felt this little rush of relief. I thought, oh, I should say hi, ask how they're doing, maybe finally organize that catch-up. So I smiled. I lifted my hand and gave her a small wave, and she looked right through me. Not in a distracted, didn't notice you kind of way. Her eyes met mine, perfectly, and there was no recognition. No flicker of, oh hey, it's you. It was just blank. She kept walking, straight past me, her expression tight and distant, like I was a stranger. I remember lowering my hand, suddenly very aware of how quiet the mall was. I turned around and watched her for a second. She didn't look back. For the rest of my shop, I felt unsettled. Not devastated, just off. On the way home, I tried to explain it to myself. I thought maybe she was angry I never came back to visit. Or maybe things had gone bad between her and Rowan, and I reminded her of that time when everything still felt okay. Or maybe, and this felt most likely, she was just having a really, really hard day, and I'd happened to cross her path at the wrong moment. You know how, during the pandemic, everyone's emotional baseline was kind of wrecked? I chalked it up to that. I went home, unpacked my groceries, and tried not to think too much about it. A little later, my phone rang. It was Rowan. I could tell from the way he said my name that something was wrong. His voice sounded thin, like he was trying to keep it steady and failing. He told me he'd gone home during his lunch break. Just a quick trip back to grab something he'd forgotten. When he walked into the backyard, he found Eliza. She was slumped over the back steps, the ones she used to sit on to smoke, where she'd watch the gum trees sway and listen to the distant crash of the waves. She died sometime that morning. For a moment, my brain just refused that information. I remember sitting there with the phone pressed to my ear, staring at the same spot on the wall while he tried to get the words out. He kept circling back, repeating details, as if maybe if he said it differently, it would make more sense. I told him I was so sorry. I asked if he had someone with him, if he was safe, if he'd slept. I don't even fully remember what I said. You know those conversations where your mouth moves, but your mind is somewhere else entirely? It was like that. It was only after we hung up that the rest of it hit me. I thought back to the mall, to the empty corridor, to Eliza's pale face, to the way her eyes met mine, and I had seen her that afternoon. I keep replaying it in my mind even now. Maybe there's a simple explanation. Maybe the times weren't exact. Maybe my memory is doing that thing where it edits and rearranges events to make a neater story. Brains are strange like that. But here's the thing I can't shake. In that abandoned shopping center, in the middle of a global crisis, I saw someone who looked like she was carrying every ounce of her grief on the outside. Someone who had once told me, in a quiet kitchen, that the person who anchored her to this world was gone. And then, not long after, she was gone too. I don't know what to do with that. I don't have a neat moral or a tidy ending. All I know is that when I think of Eliza now, I think of three images. Her, laughing softly over a pot of pasta, stirring and tasting and adjusting the seasoning. Her voice, steady but fragile, saying, "He was my person," about her dad. And her face in that empty mall, pale, wide-eyed, moving past me without a word, like she was already somewhere I couldn't follow. Sometimes, when life feels heavy, I try to remember that afternoon at their house instead. The sunlight on the floorboards, the smell of garlic and wine, the sound of an old song drifting from the speakers. For a little while, in that small coastal house, three people sat together, made a bit of messy art, shared a meal, and felt almost okay. And maybe that's all any of us really get. A few shining, ordinary moments before everything changes. You know, whenever people ask me why our family shop closes so early, I always have to smile a little first. Because the real reason sounds like something out of a ghost story. But it happened. And it happened to my mother. This was years ago, in a small town in eastern Nepal called Kaling. Back then, our shop stood alone at the edge of the main road, just before the houses thinned out and the trees began. It was a tiny place, wooden shutters, a squeaky door, shelves stacked with biscuits, tea, candles, and little sachets of needles hanging from strings. My mother, Mina, ran the shop by herself. She was one of those people who never seemed to get tired. From early morning, serving tea to farmers on their way to the fields, to late evening when the last bus rolled by, she'd be there behind the counter, smiling, chatting, counting coins. That evening, it was colder than usual. I still remember the wind that day. It kept pushing dust along the road in small swirls. By the time the sun went down, the town had gone quiet. No more motorcycles, no more school children laughing, just the occasional barking dog somewhere far away. Inside the shop, it was just the glow of a single tube light humming over our heads. I was about 10 then, and my younger brother Sanjay was 8. We were in the little room behind the shop, doing homework on the floor while Amma finished up outside. I heard her slide the metal shutter halfway down and call out, "Bas, aja lai pugyo." That's enough for today. Normally, she'd peek in to check on us, maybe nag us a bit about our handwriting. But that night, she didn't. Instead, I heard her footsteps pause in the narrow passageway between the shop and our room. Just stop. "Amma?" I called out. No answer. I can still picture her silhouette from that night. Later, Sanjay told me the same thing. She stood there, just at the doorway, one hand resting on the frame, head slightly turned as if listening to something only she could hear. Outside, the road was empty. No headlights, no people. Just darkness and that thin, pale strip of dust where the vehicles usually passed. Later, Amma told us that in that moment, she suddenly felt it. Like someone was standing very close behind her. Breathing. Watching. She said the air felt heavy, as if the whole night had somehow squeezed itself into that one narrow passage. She didn't see anyone, but she felt presence. You know when you know someone is there, even if you can't see them? That kind of feeling. She stepped quickly into the room and shut the door behind her. I remember looking up, expecting her usual, "Homework, Sakyoki?" But before I could say anything, the tube light flickered once. Then everything went black. Not power cut black, those we were used to. We'd groan, complain, and light candles. This felt different. The darkness came with this strange, ringing silence, like the whole house was suddenly very far away. I heard something fall, a soft, heavy sound. "Amma!" I shouted. My hands were shaking as I fumbled for the matchbox. When I finally lit a match, the small flame showed us Amma lying on the floor, right there in the middle of the room, her hair spread out, eyes closed. I felt my chest tighten. For a moment I thought, is she dead? We kept calling her. "Amma, Amma, Uthnosna, please get up." After what felt like a long time but was probably just a minute or two, she moved. Her eyes opened, and I swear to you, they didn't look like my mother's eyes. My Amma's eyes were always soft, kind, and a little tired. These eyes were sharp, glaring, almost furious. The pupils seemed too dark, too wide. Her face looked the same, but somehow not. And then she spoke. Except the voice that came out of her was not hers. My mother had a gentle, high, musical voice. The sound we heard that night was low and rough, like an old man who had smoked all his life. It came out slowly, scratching its way through her throat. "Chwinna, Malai Chwena. Don't touch me." I felt my whole body go cold. Sanjay clung to my arm, sobbing. My mother, or whatever was inside her, sat up in this strange, stiff way, like a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. Her lips curled into an angry sneer. She looked straight at us, but it felt like she was looking through us, at something behind us, or inside us. I remembered what my grandmother had always said. When something is wrong like this, you call the Jaki. So I ran. I don't even remember my feet touching the ground. I just remember the night air, the sound of dogs, the crunch of gravel under my slippers. I've never been a brave person, but that night, fear pushed me faster than I thought I could move. The Jaki in our town was an old man named Bide. Everyone called him Bide Baje. He lived a little higher up the hill, in a tin-roofed house that smelled of incense and herbs. I hammered on his door, breathless. "Baje, please, it's Amma. Something is wrong. Please come quickly." He looked at me for a moment, really looked, and I think he saw enough in my face to know I wasn't just a frightened child imagining things. Without asking many questions, he grabbed a small woven bag and his damaru, the little drum Jakris use, and followed me down the dark road. By the time we got back, our neighbor, Sita Auntie, had heard the commotion and was standing outside our shop, scared and confused. From inside the room, we could hear a voice. My mother's body, that same rough voice, muttering in Nepali we could barely understand, sometimes laughing, sometimes growling. We stepped in. My mother was sitting on the floor, her back against the wall. Her eyes snapped up to look at Bide Baje, and she let out this horrible, mocking little laugh. He didn't flinch. He began his ritual right away, ringing a bell, chanting mantras, circling her with incense smoke. The air grew thick with the smell of burning juniper. The small drum beat a steady, hypnotic rhythm. At first, whatever was inside her resisted. Her body jerked, her hands clawed at the air. She hissed, spat, cursed in a voice that definitely was not hers. I held Sanjay close, his face buried in my shoulder. I wanted to close my eyes, but I couldn't. I had to see. I had to know my mother would come back. Slowly, Bide Baje's voice grew louder, more commanding. His chant rolled through the room like a wave. He demanded to know who was there. "Who are you? Why have you entered this woman?" he shouted over the drum. My mother's mouth twisted. In that low, broken voice, the thing inside finally spoke clearly. "This road," it said. I remember every word. They're burned into my memory. Later, Bide Baje told us that in the old days, long before our shop existed, That very road had been used to carry the dead down to the cremation grounds by the river. People would place the bodies on bamboo stretchers, cover them with white cloth, and walk that path at dawn or dusk, chanting prayers. Years passed. The old cremation site moved closer to town. The road became just another road. Houses were built. The shop went up. And everyone forgot. Everyone except the spirits. According to Bire Bahe, some souls from those old funeral processions had never found peace. Maybe the rituals hadn't been done properly. Maybe no one remembered their names anymore. They wandered that path at night, half lost, half angry, clinging to the only route they still knew. And that night, one of them had found my mother, alone, tired, standing exactly where their feet had once passed, many times, long ago. So it slipped in. The ritual went on for what felt like hours. The voice inside my mother grew weaker, sometimes breaking into sobs, sometimes howling. At one point, it, begged to be left alone there, in our house, as if it had finally found somewhere to rest. But Bire Bahe was firm. He told it to leave, to go where it needed to go, that this house, this body, did not belong to it. Finally, suddenly, my mother gave one violent shudder, like someone dragged underwater taking one last gasp, and then she went completely limp. Silence. Just the faint ring of the bell, the soft tap of the drum, and all of us breathing too loudly in the small room. When she opened her eyes again, they were her eyes, confused, tired, scared. She looked at me, then at Sanjay, and whispered in her own voice, "Kebeko? What happened?" I burst into tears. We never told her every detail, not right away. Only that she had fainted and that the Jaki had helped. Later, when she was stronger, Bire Bahe explained gently what had happened. She listened quietly, her hands wrapped around a cup of sweet, hot tea, eyes lowered. From that night on, one thing changed forever. We never, ever kept the shop open after dark again. Even now, years later, when you pass by our family shop, you'll notice the shutter is always down before the last light leaves the sky. People joke about it sometimes. "Why so early, Dai? You don't like money or what?" They tease my brother, who runs the shop now. He just smiles and says, "Money you can earn again. Ama, there's only one." And if you happen to be there on a cold, quiet evening, standing on that stretch of road in Kaling, you might feel it too. The faintest sense that you're not completely alone. Just remember to head home before the spirits come walking. So, I've got a story for you. I honestly don't know why I haven't shared this before. The first thing happened back in, I think, 2016, and the second one in 2022. Both of them are about my grandpa, and how I'm pretty sure he kept his promise to show up after he passed. My grandpa, let's call him Leo, was always a little bit into the paranormal. Not in a spooky movie way, just curious, open. He used to say very casually, "When I go, I'll find a way to let you know I'm still around. I'll send you signs. You'll see." And because I basically grew up at my grandparents' house, I believed him. They were like my second parents. I saw them almost every day as a kid. Their house was the place where I did homework, ate way too many snacks, and watched shows I was probably a little too young for. Fast forward to the night before his funeral. I was sitting there, trying to write a eulogy for him, and my brain just froze. I knew what he meant to me, but I couldn't get the words out in a way that felt big enough, you know? Then I remembered this paper I'd written about him in middle school. The assignment was to write about a character, and oh my gosh, my grandpa Leo fit that description perfectly. He was loud and funny and stubborn and kind, all rolled into one person. The problem was, that paper had been lost for like over 20 years. It had disappeared somewhere between computer crashes, new laptops, and random file cleanups. My mom, her name's Marta, had looked for it more than once over the years. We both had kind of accepted that it was just gone. So there I am, stuck, feeling guilty that I can't honor him the way I want to. I mentioned the paper to my mom in passing, like, I wish I had that middle school assignment. It would be perfect. And then something shifts. She goes really quiet for a second, and you can see this little flicker in her eyes, like she's just remembered something important. And she says, "Hang on, I think I know where it might be." Now you have to understand, my mom has a lot of boxes in storage. The fact that she suddenly singled out one in her mind was already weird. But she walks over, pulls out this specific box from a stack, opens it, and starts rifling through like she's on a mission. And then, there it is. A printed copy of my assignment, just sitting there like it had been waiting. We just stared at it for a second in shock, and then we both started laughing and crying at the same time. The paper was so me at that age, dramatic, sentimental, a little cheesy, and so completely him. I ended up using it almost word for word for my eulogy, only changing a few things here and there, typing it into my laptop through tears. The whole thing felt like my grandpa had leaned over from wherever he is now and whispered in my mom's ear, "It's in the box. You know the one. Go get it." It honestly felt like she'd pulled that paper out of thin air. And in that moment, I just thought, "Okay, Leo, I see you. Promise kept." The second thing happened years later, and it still makes me smile. Before I got married, I took a trip with my fiancé, his name is Daniel, to visit my grandparents' graves. They're buried a few states away, so it's not like I can just stop by whenever. But it was important to me that I introduce him to them. We stood there in the quiet, and I told them, out loud, "This is Daniel. He's good to me. I think you'd like him." It might sound a little silly, but it meant a lot to me. It felt like including them in this big step in my life. We ended up eloping in Mexico. Not a big wedding, just us and a few people, in this beautiful resort town by the ocean. And on November 2nd, Dia de Muertos, the day adults are traditionally honored, we had our little wedding dinner at one of the resort restaurants. The whole place was decorated. There were marigolds everywhere, candles, papel picado fluttering above us, and several ofrendas set up with photos, candles, and little cups of coffee or tequila for loved ones who had passed. It felt warm, not sad, like a welcome. We were standing in line, waiting to be seated, just sort of taking it all in. Daniel had his arm around me, and he was being extra sweet, like he always is. And then, out of nowhere, he leans in and says, "You're my starfish." Now, that probably means nothing to you, but starfish was my grandpa Leo's nickname for me when I was little. It was his thing. Daniel has always called me Pebble as a nickname. Don't ask, it just stuck. He never uses starfish, so when he said it, my whole body went still. He looked just as surprised as I was. There was this little pause, like he hadn't even meant to say it, and then he blinked and quickly corrected himself. "I mean, you're my Pebble." And I said, "Why did you call me starfish?" He just stared at me and went, I don't know. It just came out." We were standing there, on Dia de Muertos, surrounded by ofrendas, literal pathways meant to guide loved ones back to visit, and my husband, who had never once used that nickname, calls me exactly what my grandpa used to call me. I got that same feeling again, that soft, kind of electric feeling in your chest. Not scary, not overwhelming, just like someone you miss is standing very close by. And I thought, "Okay, Leo, I hear you. You made it to the wedding." I know some people would write all of this off as coincidence, and that's fine, but I grew up hearing my grandpa say, I'll show you signs when I'm gone. I'm not going far. And then, in these really tender, important moments, when I'm trying to say goodbye or starting this huge new chapter in my life, these little impossibly perfect things happen. My mom pulls a long-lost paper out of a random box. My husband accidentally uses a nickname he's never heard. And both times, it feels exactly like my grandpa is keeping his word, reaching across whatever's between us now, just to say, I'm here. I didn't miss this. I love you. Okay, so let me just take a breath and walk you through this because even thinking about it still gives me chills. It was me, my best friend Maya, and our two guy friends, Lucas and Ben. The four of us decided it would be fun to go to this old cemetery on the edge of our town. You know the one place everybody swears is haunted? Yeah, that one. Ask anyone who's been there after dark and they'll tell you not to mess with it. So of course, we went at night. The cemetery itself is weirdly easy to get into. There's this big iron gate at the front that they lock once it gets dark, but along one side there's a long stretch of wooded ditch. You climb down, cross through some trees, and scramble back up the other side, and boom, you're in. It feels like the place wants people to slip in, honestly. And I'll be honest with you, we were absolutely looking to freak ourselves out. We weren't exactly innocent bystanders here. We wanted creepy, and we got creepy. We make it inside, and the moon is bright enough that the whole place has this silver glow. Not daylight, but just enough light to see the outlines of the graves and the mausoleums. Right at the entrance, there are these flat grave markers in the ground, and all of us are tiptoeing, being super careful not to step on them. We were scared, yeah, but we also really did not want to be disrespectful. That part was important to us. Our plan, because we were geniuses, was to walk up this long set of stone steps that leads to a big white mausoleum near the back of the cemetery. Locals say a little girl is buried there, and there's this awful story that her parents did something terrible just so they could have this huge memorial built for her. I don't even know how much of that is true, but just knowing that rumor made the whole place feel heavier. So we're standing on this path near the edge of the graveyard, kind of huddled together, and we're debating whether we actually want to go up to that mausoleum. It just felt wrong, like we'd be crossing some line we shouldn't. While everyone else is talking, I turn my head to look at one of the other mausoleums out on the main lawn, probably about 100 feet away. And that's when I see it. There's this vertical shape standing right beside the mausoleum. I couldn't see a face or clothes or anything like that, but it was about the height and width of a person. The weirdest part was the way it looked, like a sheer, hazy mix of white and gray, slowly pulsing in and out. It would be there, then fade, and then come back. Almost like someone was turning a dimmer switch on a person-shaped light. I just stared at it. You know when you're trying really, really hard to prove to yourself that your eyes are playing tricks on you? I did that. I blinked, I looked away, I looked back. It was still there. Finally, I nudged Maya and was like, "Do you see that?" And she did. Then Lucas and Ben looked, and they saw it too. And then, I swear, I noticed a second one. Another hazy shape near a different grave structure a little farther away. Same kind of flickering in and out, same humanish size, but still not quite solid. Not quite here. That was the moment where all of us kind of silently agreed. We were not welcome. We'd been there maybe 5 minutes. That's it. And already it felt like the place was pushing us back out. None of us wanted to find out what might happen if we ignored that feeling. I'm walking with Maya, and I've got both my hands wrapped around her right arm because we're both freaking out. Lucas is a little behind us, and Ben is kind of off to the side. We're all moving fast, but trying not to run like total idiots through a cemetery in the dark. All of a sudden, Maya freezes and just yelps, "Who grabbed my left arm?" I'm holding her right arm. My hands are right there. I know it's not me. I turn, and both of the guys are too far away to have touched her. Before we can even process it, she flinches again and says it happened a second time. Same spot, same strong grip. She said it felt like a very firm hand wrapping around her arm and squeezing. There was just no way it was any of us. At that point, we're done. Like, absolutely done. We head back toward the ditch we used to sneak in. We scramble down into the trees and we're crouched near the bottom, close to the road. We're trying to time when to cross so no cars see 4 kids sprinting out of a cemetery in the middle of the night. We're catching our breath when we hear this huge whooshing sound behind us, up in the dark trees. The only way I can describe it is, imagine someone taking both arms and sweeping them through a massive pile of dry leaves all at once, but amplified. Like the whole forest floor was being shoved aside. It wasn't just a breeze. It was loud, violent. None of us even looked back. The second the road was clear, we bolted across and ran straight back to the car. That was it for that night. No more brave ghost hunting. Just 4 very quiet, very shaken people on the drive home. I wish I could say it ended there. The next night, Maya and I are at my place, getting ready and waiting for the guys to come over. We're in my room, music playing quietly, just doing normal stuff. My dog, Jasper, is asleep at the foot of my bed. Out of nowhere, clear as day, we both hear this voice. It's right behind us, right at the doorway, and it just says, in this playful, almost sing-song tone, "Hey." Not a shout, not a whisper, just a casual, friendly, "Hey," like someone walked into the room. My dog's head snaps up. He turns and looks directly at the doorway where the sound came from. The hair on the back of his neck stands up. Now, you need to know this about me. I'm hard of hearing. A lot of sounds, especially soft voices or higher pitches, I just don't catch. So the fact that I heard that voice clearly, with detail and tone, that's not normal for me. That's what made my stomach drop. Maya and I just look at each other for half a second, and then we both start screaming. Full-on horror movie screaming. We call the guys like, "You need to get over here now, we are not okay." Because seriously, what are 2 girls supposed to do against something you can't even see? When Lucas and Ben get there, we make sure every door is locked, every window is shut. We all end up sitting in the living room near the front door, like somehow being closer to the exit will help if a ghost decides to show up. And then, we start praying. We're talking out loud to whatever might be in the house with us, telling it we're sorry, saying we meant no harm at the cemetery, that we didn't want to disrespect anyone. I grew up Christian, so I'm praying the way I know how, asking God to protect us and telling anything not from Him that it needs to leave. It calms down for the moment, but the next night, when I'm alone, things get worse. I know no one is home. I checked. I'm literally the only person in the house. I just sit there, frozen, listening to all this movement above my head and feeling my heart pounding in my throat. The air feels thick, like it does in the cemetery. It's the same kind of, you shouldn't be here feeling, except this time I am supposed to be here. This is my home. After a while, the noises fade. I eventually go upstairs, lights blazing in every room, and there's nothing out of place. Nothing knocked over. No sign that anything ever happened. And that's basically it. That's the whole string of weirdness. We didn't see anything else, but the feeling stuck around for days. The sense that we'd brought something back with us, that we'd opened a door we didn't really understand. I'm still Christian. I still believe there are spiritual things we can't see, and I still think some of them followed us home that night. Maya and I have talked about going back to the cemetery during the day sometime soon, not to explore, not to provoke anything, but to bring flowers, to say a real apology, to pray over the place and over ourselves, to try, in our own clumsy way, to show respect. I don't know if we picked up bad energy, or if there are just spirits there that really don't want to be messed with. I just know that for a couple of nights, it felt like the cemetery wasn't done with us, even after we left. So, this was the other night, right? I'm in the supermarket of all places, just doing a late shop, and at home it's only my kids there. My eldest, Mia, she's 19 now, was downstairs in the living room by herself. Her younger brother and sister were both upstairs in their rooms with their doors closed, totally doing their own thing. My husband, Tom, had taken me out for a quick bite, so the house was pretty quiet. It's about 7:20 p.m. when my phone just starts blowing up with messages from Mia. She's typing in all caps like, "Mom, answer the phone. Mom, there is someone in the house." So I call her straight away, and she's properly shaken. She says she saw this white figure walk past the living room doorway and down the dark hallway. Not like a shadow, she kept insisting that it was solid but pale, like someone in a white shirt or jacket. She tells me, "It was tall, Mum, like Granddad tall," and the way she said it made my stomach drop a bit. I'm trying to calm her down over the phone, like, okay, check the doors are locked, turn on all the lights, put the TV on, you'll be fine. We're on our way home." By the time we get back, she's still rattled, but nothing else happens that evening. At least, not yet. Fast forward to about 1:45 in the morning. Everyone's in bed. The kids are fast asleep. Me and Tom are lying there in the dark, blue light from our phones going, just scrolling through TikTok like we always do when we should be sleeping. Now, in our bedroom, we've got this big bookcase, and on the top shelf I keep a couple of handbags and some boxes. Nothing precarious, nothing hanging off the edge. I know because I'm the one who stacks it. Out of nowhere, we hear this loud thump slide sound, and one of my handbags doesn't just fall. It literally flies off the top shelf and lands almost perfectly in the middle of the bedroom floor, at the bottom of our bed. Me and Tom both freeze. We slowly turn to look at each other like, "Did you see that?" Nobody's moving. We don't have any pets. The windows are shut. There's no draft, nothing. I get out of bed, pick up the handbag, and without even thinking, I just blurt out, half laughing, "All right, Dad, that's not funny. Pack it in." I pop the bag back on the shelf, but inside I've got that weird feeling, you know? Like your body knows something your brain's still trying to talk you out of. So, that was weird thing number 2. Next day, I go over to my late dad's old flat to carry on clearing it out. It's such an emotional thing anyway. Sorting through his stuff, smelling his aftershave on a jacket, all of that. My aunt, his sister, Auntie Carol, pops by to help me for a bit. We're having a tea break, just chatting, and I start telling her about the handbag flying off the shelf in the middle of the night. I say, "You'll never guess what happened yesterday, at like 1:45 in the morning." And before I can even get into the details, she suddenly goes, "Oh my God, that's so weird because..." Then she tells me her story. The night before, about 9:10 p.m., she was at home alone. She'd been on FaceTime with my cousin Leah. They're just chatting away, and Auntie Carol sat at her kitchen table facing the back door and the hallway. All of a sudden, she sees a white figure, her exact words, walk from the back door across into the hallway. She said it was roughly the same height as my dad, and it moved like a person, not like a light or reflection. She gasped on the call, and Leah was like, Leah could see her reaction in real time and said she went completely pale. Auntie Carol said she genuinely thought someone had broken in. She gets up, goes to check the hallway, the doors, everything. Nobody's there. The house is locked. As she's telling me this, I'm literally sitting there with my mouth open. When she finishes, I go, "Okay, now you need to hear what happened to Mia." So I tell her about Mia seeing a tall white figure walk past the living room door around 7:20 p.m., and then the handbag launching itself off the shelf around 1:45 a.m. We both just sit there, staring at each other, and I get goosebumps from head to toe. There is no way either of us could have known about the other's experience before that conversation. Mia hadn't talked to her, and Auntie Carol hadn't said a word to us. And both times it's this white figure, about my dad's height. The thing is, my dad, granddad to the kids, used to live with Auntie Carol years ago. He'd constantly be in and out of the back door, going outside for a smoke, wandering into the hallway. Same with our house. Back when he stayed with us, he was always popping in and out, never sitting still. So now, me and my aunt are just looking at each other like, are we being haunted by your brother or what? And it doesn't even end there. My husband Tom has 2 cars parked outside the house, his newer one and his older one that he still uses sometimes. Yesterday at 4:02 p.m., and I only know the exact time because I checked the CCTV afterwards, his new car alarm suddenly starts blaring. No one's near it, the street's quiet. He goes outside, walks down the drive to check it, looks around, nothing. So of course, I pull up the CCTV footage later, expecting to see a cat, a bird, something. Nothing. No person, no movement near the car at all. Just Tom coming out in his slippers looking confused. We shrug it off as some weird glitch. Then today, at 5:01 p.m., again, exact time from the CCTV, the alarm on the old car starts going off. Same deal, I check the footage. Once again, no one near it, no cats, no foxes, no dodgy neighbors. Just the car suddenly losing its mind, then Tom trudging out yet again to turn the alarm off. So now we've got Mia seeing a tall white figure in our hallway, a handbag flying off a shelf at the foot of our bed, Auntie Carol seeing a tall white figure walk from her back door into her hallway, 2 separate car alarms going off on 2 different days at almost the exact same time of day, both with nothing on camera to set them off. And all of this within about 24 hours. At this point, I'm half freaked out and half laughing, because if my dad is behind this, it is exactly his sense of humor. He had a wicked, cheeky streak. He loved winding people up, jumping out on us, playing silly pranks, making us jump, then absolutely howling with laughter. So I'm sitting there going, is this all just some massive coincidence? Faulty alarms, gravity doing its thing, our imaginations running wild? Or is my dad just having the time of his life on the other side, messing with us? Honestly, I don't know. But I do know this, if it is him, he will be absolutely delighted that we're all running around, checking CCTV, screaming over handbags and car alarms, swapping ghost stories and saying, oh my God, that's so like him. And I can just picture him, wherever he is, doubled over laughing, going, lighten up, I'm only playing. So, okay, let me just start from the beginning, because this whole thing still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. I moved into this house, I want to say late 2019, maybe early 2020, somewhere around then. The dates blur together a bit. What I do remember is my mom, Elena, telling me the place was close to 100 years old. Like, really old. Creaky floorboards, weird little corners, the whole vibe. My stepdad, Mark, was doing a lot of the fixing up himself, and he'd make these comments that at first I laughed off. He'd be working on the walls or repainting trim and say things like, man, I don't think they like this. Meaning, whoever was here before us, or whatever. He said he could feel it, like the house itself was annoyed. And honestly, every time we came over to work on it before we officially moved in, it did feel like something was there. Not like, oh, I'm so spooked, what a fun Halloween moment, but like a pressure, a presence that didn't want company. Anyway, let me explain the layout a bit so this makes sense. There's this hallway, kinda long, not super wide. If you're standing at one end, on the left side at the very end, there's a door that leads to my mom's office. Just before that, also on the left but a bit further down, there's a door to my mom's bedroom. So when you walk down the hall, you pass her room first, then the office. It's one of those hallways that feel longer at night, you know? Like it stretches. So one night, it was already dark out. I was walking down the hallway toward my mom's room. The office door was open, lights off in there. And as I'm passing by, I glance in, just a quick look. That's when I see it. There's something on the floor, on its hands and knees, facing the doorway. It was so pale it almost didn't look like skin. No clothes, no real features that I could make out, just a shape, a person-shaped thing. But its eyes, or I guess where its eyes should have been, are what I can't forget. They weren't eyes, they were just holes. Completely black, like someone punched 2 tunnels into its face and forgot to put anything back in. I honestly can't remember if it had a mouth. Maybe my brain just blocked that out. But the feeling that I remember, it was like being dropped into ice water. I froze. It stared, if you can call it staring when there aren't any eyes. And for a second, I didn't even feel like I was in my own body. And then it was just gone. I blinked, looked again, and the office was empty. I don't remember hearing it move. I didn't even hear the floor creak. I just remember my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I tried to gaslight myself, like, okay, you're tired, you're jumpy, it was a shadow, it was a pile of laundry, all the usual things. But no pile of laundry has eye holes, you know? Now, the next part isn't something I saw, it's something my brother Jonah told me. Back then, our bedrooms were right next to each other on the same floor. I've moved upstairs since, but at that point, our doors practically shared a wall. One night I was in my room like usual, just lying in bed and doom-scrolling on my phone. Lights off, not really thinking about anything deep, just existing. Jonah walks into my room kind of abruptly, looking off. Not full-on panicked, but definitely not okay. He goes, "Were you just in my room?" I look up from my phone and I'm like, "No, I've been here the whole time." He stares at me for a second and then says, "I just saw someone in my closet who looked exactly like you, but paler. And not just, oh, you need some sun, pale. He meant wrong, pale." So I'm sitting there thinking, okay, so either my brother's messing with me, or there is something in this house that can mimic me. And honestly, neither option feels great. Like, hello, a mimic in my house? And why me specifically? Why not copy literally anyone else? And if it is some kind of mimic, is that a bad sign? Because my gut is saying yes. Very yes. And then there's this other thing that happens, not just once, but over and over. Almost every night, between like 3 a.m. and 5 a.m., I get this feeling I cannot shake. Doesn't matter if I'm on my phone, watching a show, listening to music, whatever. There's this heaviness in the air. I always feel like I'm being watched. Sometimes from the doorway, sometimes from the corner of the room, sometimes from behind me. Nothing dramatic happens, no flying objects, no slamming doors. It's just this intense awareness of something, like someone standing just out of sight, and it doesn't go away. It fades a bit once the sky starts lightening, but those late hours, they're the worst. People always say, well, maybe it's carbon monoxide. And like, fair, that's important to check. But I have a carbon monoxide detector. It's never gone off. So I feel like that explanation is pretty much ruled out. I do have a Ouija board in my room, which I know sounds like I'm begging for trouble, but I've literally never used it. It just sits there. I don't know if that matters, but part of me wonders if just having it is like leaving the door cracked open a little, you know? And this might be unrelated, but I'll mention it because it feels connected somehow. When I was really little, I used to say weird things about paranormal stuff all the time. My older cousin Mia told me once that when we were kids, I pointed at a wall and said I saw a green door there. Not a real one, just a door only I could see. And then apparently I looked up and said there was another door in the ceiling, but I don't even remember what color that one was supposed to be. There's also this story my mom loves to tell. She says that when I was a toddler, I looked at her very seriously one night and asked, "Do you remember when I was sitting with the others and you picked me out?" Like I was talking about, I don't know, a before. A place where there were others, and somehow she chose me. I don't remember saying that. I don't remember anything like that. But it's one of those phrases that just sticks in your brain once you hear it. So now I'm here, older, living in this not quite a century-old house, seeing pale things in offices, hearing my brother say he saw a me but not me in his closet, and lying awake between 3 and 5 a.m., feeling like something is standing over my shoulder. And I don't know what to do. I'm not totally against the idea of ghosts being around. Like, if there are spirits here just vibing quietly in the background, fine. Live your afterlife, I guess. But whatever is happening now is starting to genuinely scare me. It feels different, more focused, less like random spooky house stuff and more like attention, directed at me. I guess what I'm really looking for is some kind of answer, some way to understand what this might be, or at least how worried I should be. Because right now, I feel like I'm stuck between maybe it's nothing and maybe it's something really bad. And that's not a fun place to live in, especially when it's literally your home. So yeah, that's my story. The hallway thing, the mimic in the closet, the late night watching feeling, the weird stuff I said as a kid, all of it. I'm okay, I'm functioning, but underneath that, I'm scared. So, picture this. I'm sitting on the couch with my family, right? We've just demolished this tub of cookies and cream ice cream. I was the one who scraped the last spoonful out, and as soon as I did, everyone turned and looked at me like I'd just committed a crime. My sister goes, "Well, Leo finished it, so obviously he's the one going to get more." And the whole room just kind of nodded like a jury delivering a verdict. Now, the only place still open at that time of night, about 10:45 p.m., was this little milk bar about 2.5 kilometers away, on the other side of the forest. It's one of those old tracks people don't really use much anymore. The council tried to close it once because it was unsafe, which, in hindsight, yeah, fair. But in that moment, I knew there was no arguing my way out. So I chuck on my warmest hoodie, some trackies, my old beat-up sneakers, and this ridiculous beanie my grandma knitted. I grab my half-dead head torch, you know the type where the light flickers like a horror movie prop, and head out the door. The air outside was cold enough to bite a little when I breathed in. The streetlights stopped a few houses down, and then it was just darkness and that faded dirt trail leading into the trees. I started walking, telling myself, it's just a walk, just a forest, just ice cream. You'll be fine. For the first 10 minutes or so, it was pretty uneventful. Just the crunch of gravel, the squelch of mud, and the occasional moth dive-bombing straight into my torch. The beam was weak and cracked across the lens, so it threw light in this weird, patchy way that made tree trunks look like they were shifting when they weren't. Then, out of nowhere, I hear this rustling behind me. Before I can even turn around properly, this whole bunch of rabbits, like a lot of them, comes sprinting past me along the track. I'm talking maybe 15, 20 rabbits, all at once, zooming by as fast as kids running out of school on a Friday. They raced past my feet, then suddenly split in every direction, diving into the bushes like something had just yelled, "Scatter!" I kind of laughed for a second like, okay, that was weird. But then, before I could finish that thought, something much bigger crashed through the undergrowth to my left. A deer, at least I think it was a deer, burst out of the bushes, close enough that I felt the air move when it passed. Its eyes were wide, its legs were flailing, and it looked absolutely terrified. It veered off toward the right side of the track and tore off into the trees, hooves smashing through sticks and leaves. And there's this moment after that where everything went quiet. You know that really eerie quiet? Where suddenly you're hyper-aware of your own breathing. That kind. I stood there thinking, okay, the animals are acting like there's a fire or a wolf or something. That's fine. That's normal. We're fine. I tried to shrug it off. Maybe someone's walking their dog. Maybe there was a loud noise I didn't hear. I took a few more steps forward, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Then I heard it. From somewhere behind me, maybe 100 meters or so back on the track, this scream just ripped through the forest. It wasn't a human scream. It wasn't an animal scream I recognized either. It sounded like metal tearing and someone shouting at the same time. This blood-curdling, ragged, broken noise that made my whole body lock up. My chest tightened so fast it actually hurt. For a second, I swear I forgot how to breathe. Every instinct I had just started yelling at me, "Run." So I did. After what felt like forever, but was probably only 70 or 80 meters, curiosity, or stupidity, you pick, got the better of me. I glanced over my shoulder, and that's when I saw it. There, in the middle of the track, under the broken beam of my torch, was this thing. Pale white, tall, and unnaturally thin, like its limbs were too long for its body. It was down on all fours, but its back was arched too high, like it was almost standing and crawling at the same time. It was panting and growling, this horrible wet sound, and its head was tilted just enough that I could tell it was staring straight at me. I didn't get a good look at its face, and honestly, I'm grateful for that. Any idea I ever had about being the brave one in the family died right there on that track. I always thought, if anything ever happened, I'd be the one who'd stand their ground, throw a punch, something. But in that moment, no. Flight absolutely obliterated fight. I veered off the trail into the forest without even thinking, just hoping that if I got out of the open, I'd at least have a chance. The ground immediately got worse. Roots, rocks, thick undergrowth, and I was trying to dodge everything while still running flat out. There was this fallen tree up ahead, a big one, and I tried to leap over it. My foot caught on something, and the next thing I knew, I was eating dirt. I hit the ground so hard I saw little bursts of light behind my eyes. My head torch flew off my head, bounced once, and dried completely. The forest snapped into pitch-black darkness in less than a second. And that was it. No phone, no spare light, nothing. I'd left my phone at home because I thought, I'm just getting ice cream. What could happen? The only thing I had on me was my wallet with about $15 in it, which was not particularly useful in the middle of a forest with something nightmare-shaped chasing me. As my ears started ringing themselves out, I realized I could still hear it. That thing was getting closer. Its breathing was louder now, heavier, almost like it had been running for ages and wasn't even close to tired yet. I could hear branches snapping, leaves crunching, something dragging slightly with every step. I knew there was no way I could outrun it in the dark without snapping my ankle or knocking myself out on a tree, so I did the only thing I could think of. I hid. When I'd fallen, my hand had brushed against this small hollow beneath the log I'd tried to jump. It looked like some animal burrow or just where the ground had worn away. It wasn't big, but when I reached down and felt around, I thought, maybe, just maybe, I can fit. Adrenaline is wild, by the way. I grabbed the edge of that log and somehow, with every muscle in my body shaking, managed to lift it just enough to wriggle myself underneath. Then I eased it back down on top of me, praying it wouldn't slam and give away my spot. The space under there was tight. Dirt pressed up against my chest. I could feel roots digging into my arms. My face was just inches from the ground. I had to turn my head slightly just so I could breathe. Through this thin crack near the bottom, I could see a sliver of the forest floor and a bit of moonlight. That's when it got close. I could hear it first, those uneven, mangled footsteps, like something with joints that didn't quite bend the right way. Then I saw them. Feet. Or what I think were feet. They were pale and twisted, like the bones inside were bent out of shape. The legs moved in this jerky, too fast way, almost like they were going to snap with every step, but somehow didn't. It thundered past the log, breathing harder than a lawnmower ripping through tall grass, this horrible, raspy inhale that felt like it was right inside my ear. All I kept thinking was, do not sneeze, do not cough, do not exist. It kept going, the sound of it crashing through the forest growing fainter and fainter. Even after I couldn't hear it anymore, I still stayed frozen. Time kind of stopped being real at that point. It felt like I lay there for hours, but when I later did the math, it must have been about 40, maybe 50 minutes. Eventually, my eyes adjusted a bit to the darkness, and my brain started whispering, okay, you either stay here forever, or you run. So I eased myself out from under the log, as quietly as I could. Every little sound felt like a gunshot. Once I was free, I didn't even bother trying to find the track carefully. I just moved, crawling at first, then walking, then running once I spotted the faint line of the trail again. From there, I sprinted. I don't remember much of that part, honestly. Just branches, cold air burning my lungs, and this feeling that if I slowed down even a little, that thing would suddenly be behind me again. Eventually, the trees started thinning, and I saw it. The faint glow of the Milk Bar's sign through the gaps. I have never loved fluorescent lights more in my life. I stumbled into the shop, covered in dirt and leaves, hoodie torn, breathing like I'd run a marathon. There's this little bell on the door that dinged cheerfully, completely at odds with whatever I'd just crawled out of. Behind the counter was the owner, an older guy named Mr. D'Souza, who's usually pretty chill. He looked up, saw me, and his eyes went huge. I glanced up at the clock on the wall. It said 12:27 a.m., which meant I'd been out there, mostly hiding under that log, for close to an hour and a half. My brain was still scrambled eggs, so I walked up to the counter and, for some reason, the first thing out of my mouth when he asked what happened was, I was hunting rabbits. Like that explained anything. He just stared at me for a second, then kind of half smiled, like he knew I was lying but decided not to push it. "You look like the rabbits won," he said. I grabbed the tub of ice cream my family liked, different flavor this time, caramel swirl, paid with my filthy hands, and then just blurted, "Hey, is there any chance you could give me a lift home? My, legs are a bit done." He studied me for a moment. This man in his 50s, kind eyes, lines on his face that said he'd heard a lot of stories and probably believed about half of them. Then he nodded. "Of course," he said softly. "You shouldn't be walking out there this late anyway." He shut up the shop, locked the door, and walked me to his car. I sat in the passenger seat, clutching the ice cream like it was some kind of trophy, and watched the trees slide by as we drove back along the main road. The forest was just a dark mass off to the side, no sign at all of what had happened in there. When we pulled up outside my house, he glanced over at me and said, "Next time, Tell your family they can get their own ice cream, hmm? I laughed a little, even though my hands were still shaking. Yeah, I said. I think I might. I went inside, handed my very confused family their ice cream, and didn't say a word about what really happened on that track. But I'll tell you this. I haven't walked through that forest at night since. So, okay. Let me just talk to you like we're sitting on the couch together, because this is a lot easier to tell than it is to type out. For you to really picture it, I've got to start with the layout. My place is kind of like a tiny compound. There's the main house in the front, where my family is most of the time. Then, tucked in the back left corner of the yard, there's this little playhouse we used to use as kids. And in the back right corner, there's the tiny house. My older brother used to live in that tiny house, but he moved out a while ago, and now it's just there. Empty. Quiet. A little too quiet. Now, one thing about me, I'm very open to paranormal and spiritual stuff, but I'm not out here chasing ghosts with night vision cameras and EMF meters, you know? I'm not trying to be on a reality show. I'm actually a really logical person. I want evidence, explanations, science, all of that. But I'm also super emotional and intuitive. I feel things really deeply, and sometimes I pick up on vibes before I pick up on facts. I'm a Pisces, if that means anything to you. I'm not like a hardcore astrologer, but I believe in it enough, and I've heard over and over that Pisces tend to be more perceptive with paranormal stuff, seeing, feeling, hearing things that other people might miss, especially when it comes to spirits. For a few years now, the upstairs of the tiny house has just felt wrong. Not like horror movie wrong, but off. Heavy. I'd go up there to grab something or to sit alone for a bit, and I'd get this feeling like I wasn't alone. Like someone was watching me from the corner of the room. You know that feeling when the air gets thick, like you're being studied? Yeah, that. But I never really dug into it. I just kind of brushed it off as me being dramatic or tired or whatever. Then, about a week and a half ago, it finally clicked that maybe this wasn't just in my head. My best friend, Lena, she's also a Pisces by the way, comes over a lot. When my younger siblings are being loud tornadoes in the main house, she and I sneak off to the tiny house to escape. The upstairs is like our secret hideaway. So we're up there one afternoon, just scrolling on our phones and talking, and out of nowhere I ask, "Hey, do you ever feel weird up here? Like, not just normal weird, but watched." She pauses, looks around, and goes, "Honestly, yeah, I felt that for a while. I just didn't want to say anything first." We both kind of laugh, but it's that nervous laugh, you know? We start talking about paranormal stuff and decide that someday, when we're not broke, we'll buy one of those spirit communication devices, like an Alice box or something, to see if anything actually responds. That same day, though, I'm like, why wait? I might as well try something simple. So later, when I'm alone upstairs in the tiny house, I try that old pencil cross game thing you see online. I set it up, ask a couple of questions, and nothing. Absolutely nothing. Just me and two very still pencils. It feels more silly than spooky. I get bored pretty quickly. So I decide to call Lena and tell her everything I'm feeling in more detail. I grab my phone, hit call, and it rings once, and then, boom, straight to voicemail. No waiting, just immediate. I figure she rejected it by accident, so I text her, "Hey, why aren't you picking up?" She replies, "I didn't get a call? There's nothing on my end." We shrug it off as a random glitch. Phones are weird sometimes, right? So I do what any logical person does. I Google it. I'm scrolling through all these help articles and forum posts, trying to find some technical explanation, but nothing really fits. It's just odd. That's the first weird thing. I stay upstairs for a while longer, still in that tiny living room area, trying to talk myself out of being creeped out. About an hour later, I get a notification from Lena. I open my messages and see this little bubble that just says, reacted with question mark to a photo. Only, there's no photo, no image, no attachment, nothing to react to. I text her, "What did you just react to?" She goes, "What do you mean? I just opened our chat and that popped up. I thought it was from you." We scroll back through the messages. Nothing. No picture, no link, nothing that should have had a reaction. At that point, I'm like, okay, my phone is being its usual broken self, and I try to let it go. Later that night, I decide to try calling her from my laptop on Discord instead. You know, different device, different connection. We get on a call, and it works fine. We're chatting, laughing, talking about school and random drama for almost an hour. Then suddenly, mid-sentence, everything cuts off. The call disconnects, my screen freezes, and these weird, glitchy blocks start popping up across the display. Not like a simple lag, more like the graphics are breaking apart. I try to close the app. Nothing. I try to shut the laptop down, and it just won't respond. Meanwhile, the Wi-Fi icon says full bars. Every other device in the house is fine. I text Lena from my phone. "Why'd you hang up?" She replies, "That was you. My Discord just said you disconnected." And that's when I feel that familiar heaviness again. I'm sitting upstairs in the tiny house, in this weird digital silence, and my brain goes, what if it's not the Wi-Fi? What if something up here is messing with my stuff? Now listen, I know there can be 100 logical explanations. Software bugs, random network issues, whatever. And I try really hard to lean on those. The thing that gets me, though, is that it only happens up there. Upstairs. In that tiny house. Nowhere else. By this point, it's getting late, like around 10, and I'm feeling more uneasy than curious. I power everything down, head down the stairs a little faster than usual, and lock up for the night. Fast forward 2 days. I'm still thinking about everything, so I download this EVP-style Spirit Box app, one of those that's supposed to pick up on spirit energy. I know, it's a phone app, so my expectations are basically on the floor. But the reviews are surprisingly positive, so I'm like, okay, this is probably fake, but let's see. I go upstairs in the tiny house, sit down, and open the app. The interface has this big meter at the top and a little text bar underneath. The meter goes from blue to orange to red. Blue means nothing nearby. Orange means something might be close. Red means it's right next to you. The text bar underneath gives vague prompts like, when it's quiet, word, sentence, or things like walking, steps, and so on when it detects something. The app starts with this slow, steady beeping. The bar is mostly blue. I take a breath and say, "Hi, my name is Rowan." Nothing happens at first. The beeping stays slow. The bar flickers a little, but barely. Then I say, "If there is any spirit or energy in here with me, can you please give me a sign?" Almost immediately, the meter jumps from blue to a bright orange. The beeping speeds up, and the little text bar flashes, noise. I freeze. My heart starts to beat faster. I'm suddenly very aware that I'm alone up there. I panic a little and shut the app off. As soon as I do, the room feels heavier. Like something doesn't want me to leave. Like something's watching me and waiting to see what I'll do next. Despite all that, somehow, I'm still skeptical. I keep telling myself, it's just an app. It's probably programmed to do this. Don't jump to conclusions. I know. How stubborn can one person be? Over the next couple of weeks, I don't really try anything big again. I still go up there sometimes, mostly to study or just get away from the noise in the main house. And every now and then, I'll quietly say, "Hi," or "Bye," or "Hope you're okay," just in case something is listening. It feels weirdly rude not to. Then, last night happened. I went upstairs to the tiny house with my backpack and my laptop, just wanting some peace so I could finish my homework. The air felt normal enough, a little still, but not threatening. I finished my assignments, and I was about to pack up and go back to the main house when I thought, you know what? One more try, just to see if anything happens again, or if it really was just my brain making patterns out of nothing. So I opened the Spirit Box app again. This time, the meter doesn't start in blue. It's already shifting between a pale yellow and light orange, like it's picking something up right away. The beeping is steady, but not fast. I say, "Hi again. My name is Rowan. Are you here with me right now?" The beeping picks up just a bit, and the bar solidly turns orange. The text underneath flashes, "Word." I swallow and take that as a yes. "Okay," I say. "If you don't mind, could you come a little closer?" I know how that sounds, but I'm trying to be respectful. I'm not yelling or daring it to scare me. I'm just asking. I stare at the screen. Every few seconds, the meter climbs higher. The beeping gets louder and faster, like a heart monitor speeding up. Orange gives way to this pulsing red at the top, and the whole thing looks like it's maxing out. My own heart is racing now. My legs feel kind of numb, and the hair on the back of my neck is standing up. Even though I'm staring at the screen, I can't shake the feeling that something else in the room is moving closer. I quickly take a screenshot, partly to show Lena later, and partly because I feel like, if I don't document this, I'm going to convince myself it didn't happen. And then, the little text bar beneath the meter updates. One word appears. Behind. Everything in me just locks up. I don't move. I don't breathe. I'm sitting there, holding my phone, staring at that one word. The room suddenly feels colder, like all the warmth has been sucked out in a second. The feeling of being watched goes from maybe to absolutely. I don't want to look over my shoulder. Instead, I very carefully say, "Okay, I'm going to ask you to please give me some space." My voice is shaking a little, but I try to keep it calm and respectful. I don't want to be rude or challenge whatever it is, but I also don't want it right on top of me. I press the home button and close the app. The beeping stops. The room is quiet, except for the sound of my breathing. I stand up, still trying not to make any sudden movements, and head toward the stairs. Just before I go down, I stop in the doorway, look back at the room, and say, softly, "Thank you for responding. I'm leaving now. Please don't follow me. Goodbye." Because honestly, the last thing I want is to make whatever's up there angry. Whether it's actually a spirit, or just energy, or something my brain doesn't fully understand, I'd rather be respectful. I'm not trying to get rid of it out of anger. I just want to feel peaceful up there. I want to be able to use that space without my devices going haywire, and without feeling like someone's standing right behind me when I'm completely alone. And that's where I'm at right now, caught between the logical explanations and the things I can't quite explain. Talking to you, hoping that saying it out loud makes it a little less scary. So, I grew up in and around a car shop. My parents have owned a little automotive garage since the late 1970s. Back then, it wasn't much. Just 3 bays, a cramped office, and a coffee pot that always tasted a little like burnt oil. When I was about 8, my dad, Luis, started bringing me in during the summers so I could sweep floors, stack tires, and earn my keep, as he put it. I loved it. The place was always alive, air compressors hissing, the metallic clink of wrenches, radios playing classic rock, the smell of rubber and gasoline hanging in the air. It felt safe to me, like a second home. I never once felt scared there. At least, not until one evening. I was 12 when it happened. We had just wrapped up a long day. The last customer had left, the big garage doors were rolled down, and the only light in the shop came from the setting sun slanting in through the windows. My dad was in his office finishing up invoices. He poked his head out and said, "Hey, Sam, go ahead and shut everything down, yeah? Flip the breakers, lock the side doors. I'll be out in a minute." This was routine by then. I knew the drill. I walked through the quiet shop, my sneakers echoing on the concrete. The silence felt thick after a full day of noise. I remember the smell of hot metal cooling and the faint ticking of engines settling. One of the bays was taken up by this huge red ladder truck from the fire department. We did maintenance on their vehicles sometimes. The front of it was facing out, and there was this strip of orange light pouring around its sides from the windows, like it was haloed in sunlight. I locked up the front door, double-checked the side entrance, then headed toward the back to cut the breakers. That's when it hit me. This feeling, like someone had just stepped into the room behind me. That electric, prickly sensation between your shoulder blades that says, "You're not alone." I stopped mid-step. The property was fully fenced in, an 8-foot chain-link fence topped with barbed wire, plus a heavy rolling gate at the front. You couldn't just wander in off the street. I knew that. But the feeling crawled right up my spine anyway. I remember thinking, "Don't turn around, don't turn around, don't." Of course, I turned around. My eyes went straight to that fire truck, or more specifically, to the light around it. The sunlight behind it was so bright that the space around its frame glowed. I stared at that glow, and as I was watching, something moved. A dark shape, low, like someone crouching, slid out from behind the truck just far enough to peek around the side. It completely blocked the light for a second. Just a solid, black silhouette with a head and shoulders, maybe an arm pressed to the floor. I couldn't see a face, just the outline. And then, so fast it didn't even look human, it jerked back behind the truck again. Smooth and wrong, like it didn't quite match the way real bodies move. I froze. I didn't yell. I didn't investigate. Every instinct I had screamed at me to get away from there, so I did exactly that. I ran, full sprint, straight to my dad's office. I burst in, out of breath, and I remember my voice cracking as I told him, "Dad, there's somebody in the shop, behind the fire truck. I swear, I saw them." He looked up from his desk, pen still in hand, and just smiled. That kind of half-amused, half-exasperated smile. "Sam, relax," he said. "Nobody can get in. The gate's locked. You're spooking yourself." I begged him to check, so he humored me. Nothing. Not a soul. On the way back to the office, he chuckled and ruffled my hair. "Got yourself a wild imagination, kiddo. This place isn't haunted. I built on empty land, just dirt and trees out here before us." After that, it turned into a running joke. Anytime I jumped at a sound or mentioned something odd I'd noticed, somebody, my dad, my mom, Elena, would say, "Careful, Sam's seeing things again." I laughed along, but inside I knew what I'd seen. That shadow wasn't a trick of the light. It felt aware of me, like it was waiting for me to notice it. 2 years went by. By then I was 14, more interested in friends and music than in sweeping up lug nuts, but I still helped at the shop. One night my dad came home late. I was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. He walked in, set his keys down a little too carefully, and just stood there for a second, like he was trying to decide what to say. My mom, Rosa, looked up from the sink. "You okay?" she asked. "You look like you saw a ghost." Dad let out this shaky little laugh that did not sound like him. "You're not going to believe this," he said, looking right at me. "But I think I owe Sam an apology." That got my attention. He sat down at the table and folded his hands, and I noticed they were trembling just a bit. He told us he'd stayed late at the shop to finish payroll. Everyone else was gone. Doors locked, lights off in the bays, just his office lamp on. He'd done that 1,000 times before in the 30-something years he'd worked in that building. He was mid-sentence on an invoice when a sound exploded through the walls. He described it as a bam, like someone had taken a sledgehammer to a steel drum right behind his head. The whole office shook. Files jumped on the desk. The metal blinds clattered against the window. He thought someone had crashed a car into the side of the building. That's how violent it felt. Heart pounding, he grabbed the pistol he kept locked in his bottom drawer, took a flashlight, and went to check. He said, "Sam, I was so sure there was someone in there that I called out, 'Hey, who's there?'" He checked the bays. Empty. He checked the doors. Still locked. He walked the outside perimeter, shining the flashlight along the walls, looking for damage, a crack, something. Nothing. No dents, no broken glass, no footprints in the gravel. When he went back inside, he sat down at his desk and just listened. The building was silent. Too silent. He told us that on the drive home he started thinking, maybe it was pipes, maybe the AC, maybe the building settling. So the next day, he pulled the old blueprints out of storage and spread them across his desk, tracing the lines with a finger. He expected to see big pipes or ductwork running through the office walls. There wasn't anything, just standard framing. No heavy lines, no old furnace shafts, nothing that could have made that kind of impact sound. He looked at me then, softer than I'd ever seen him. "I've been in that office for 30 years, he said. "I've never heard anything like that. So, if you say you saw something, kiddo, I believe you now." I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt vindicated. The other part? Terrified. Because if he believed me, that meant whatever I'd seen wasn't just childhood nerves. Something was wrong with that place. About a year later, it was my mom's turn. She had this habit of going in on Saturday mornings to clean when the shop was closed. Less clutter, fewer people in her way. She liked putting on music and getting everything spotless before Monday rolled around. This particular weekend, it was just her. The guys were off, Dad was running errands, I was at a friend's house. Heavy footsteps. Boots. Walking slowly across the mezzanine that overlooked the shop. Now, you have to picture this. Above the offices, there was a loft used for storage. Old parts, tires, boxes of invoices from 10 years ago. The floor up there was made of wood laid over steel beams. When someone walked across it in work boots, you could hear it. Deep, solid thuds. We knew that sound. She heard those footsteps travel from one end of the mezzanine to the other. Deliberate. One after another. Clear as day. She called out, "Louise? Is that you?" No answer. The footsteps stopped. A moment later, they started again, closer to where she was standing, like whoever it was had turned around. That was it for her. She set the rag down, grabbed her purse, and left the shop without even turning off the radio. When she got home, she was pale and visibly shaken. She told my dad what happened and said, "I'm not going in there alone again. If I clean, I do it when everyone's around. That's it." My dad tried to reassure her at first, told her it was probably the building settling, or maybe a stray cat on the roof. But later, when it was just me and him, he admitted, quietly, "I've heard the boots up there too." After that, we all started noticing things. Sometimes we'd walk into the bays first thing in the morning, and the long metal strips and car parts hanging from the racks would be swaying gently, like they'd been pushed a few seconds before we came in. Not a soft, random sway either. Sometimes they'd be rocking enough that you could hear the metal clips clinking. But there was no draft. no fans on. The big doors were shut. It was still air, with moving parts. We found tools left in strange places, sockets lined up in a neat little row in the middle of the floor when nobody remembered putting them there. Once, Dad found a single greasy fingerprint on the inside of a locked display case he swore he'd just cleaned. We never saw another figure like the one I saw behind the fire truck. At least, I didn't. But the feeling of being watched, of not being alone, even when you had the keys and you knew every door was locked, that stayed. It became this unspoken rule. Nobody stayed in the shop by themselves after dark if they didn't absolutely have to. Even my dad, who used to laugh at me for being jumpy, started closing up a little faster, double-checking locks with a new kind of tension in his shoulders. Years later, we decided to expand. Business had grown, and the old building was showing its age. The plan was to put up a new, bigger shop on the same property, just further back. The day they started digging, we all went out to watch the backhoes and excavators tear into the ground. It was exciting, this whole new era for the family business. The excitement didn't last long. As they dug, the operators started noticing things turning up in the soil. Metal fragments at first, then shapes that were a little too deliberate to be randatory junk. Someone called a local historian, and they ended up roping off part of the site. Over the next few days, they uncovered artifacts, old uniform buttons, bits of rusted metal that looked like they might have been from rifles, and what looked like pieces of buckles and canteens. Everything worn, but clearly not modern. That's when we finally got the full story. Long before my parents bought that land, in fact, long before there was even a road out there, those fields had been part of a major Civil War battle site. A lot of men had fought and died on that ground. There were old records, maps, the whole thing. We had opened our shop, spent decades working, laughing, and living our lives on land that had once been soaked in fear and chaos and blood. And we never knew. After a long moment, he said, almost to himself, "So, I guess the land wasn't as empty as I thought." I don't pretend to know exactly what I saw that day behind the fire. Hey guys, welcome back to Paranormal M. It's finally time to sit down together and talk about some creepy stories. It's been a long day, so let's just relax for a bit. Thank you so much to everyone who sent in their paranormal experiences. And if you've got more stories of your own, don't be shy. Send them my way. Before we jump into today's tales, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. So, hey, I'm Lila, and since it's October, I figured it's finally time to talk about the house I grew up in. I always feel like I have to start with, I'm not some amazing storyteller. I didn't write this all out as a novel or anything. I'm just going to talk to you the way I'd tell a friend at like 1 a.m. on the couch with the lights off. Most of this happened in the early 2000s, when I was a kid, in my mom's house. From as far back as I can remember, I was terrified of one specific part of that house. My mom's bedroom and the main bathroom next to it. The rest of the place felt fine, but that hallway, I would speed walk past it like it was a cliff edge. At first there wasn't really a reason, it was just this gut feeling, that heavy, watched feeling. Then my stepdad Mark got sick. He had lung cancer. He ended up on hospice in my mom's bedroom, and that's where he died when I was 9. After that, the house just changed. One of the first things that started happening was the back door. When Mark was alive, he had bad insomnia. He'd be up all night, pacing around, going outside to smoke or just get air. His routine was always the same. Door open, footsteps to the yard, a pause, footsteps back, door close, lock. After he died, that exact routine kept happening. I'd be in bed late at night and suddenly hear the back door open, footsteps across the tile, a pause, the back door again. It would close, then that tiny metallic click of the lock. I was 9, absolutely terrified, and there was no way I was getting up to check. I'd just lie there stiff as a board thinking, Nope, no thank you. I'm good right here. When I told my mom about it, she'd just sigh and say, "You're hearing the neighbors," or "You're imagining things." But my older sister Jess heard it too. We'd look at each other down the hallway some nights like, "You heard that, right?" And we didn't even have to say it out loud. One night, not long after, I couldn't sleep and decided to crash in the living room. Now this was before smartphones. No scrolling, no Netflix on a tablet, just me, a couch, and the dark. I remember just lying there, kind of staring around, letting my mind wander, when I heard footsteps come up behind the couch. Not from the hallway, from directly behind me. Instant goosebumps. That buzzing feeling under your skin when you know you're not alone. I squeezed my eyes shut and pretended to be asleep, because in my kid brain, if I looked like I was sleeping, maybe whatever it was would, I don't know, go away. Then I heard my name. Lila. Lila. It was my mom's voice. Clear, soft, just above a whisper. She said my name maybe 3 times. I could feel someone behind me, like they were standing over me, staring down. I did not move. I just kept breathing slow and shallow, pretending to sleep until, eventually, I really did fall asleep. The next morning at breakfast, I asked my mom, "Hey, did you come into the living room last night and say my name?" She looked at me and said, "No, honey, I was asleep." I told her it sounded exactly like her voice, and that something was standing behind the couch. She brushed it off, told me I was being paranoid, making things up. After that, I pretty much swore I would never spend another night in that living room if I could help it. My mom is still like that, by the way. Denies everything. To this day, she won't admit that house is even a little bit haunted. She'll just laugh and say we watched too many horror movies. But my sister? Jess had her own stories. One time she was furious and came into the kitchen where my mom and I were. She was like, "Okay, whoever keeps opening my bedroom door in the middle of the night, stop. It's freaking me out." She said sometimes she could feel something tugging at her while she slept, like something was grabbing her feet or pulling at her blanket, enough to wake her up. That's when we really started comparing notes for the first time. I told her that in my room I felt okay, like it was my little safe bubble, but the moment I stepped out, I felt watched, constantly. I would literally sprint back to my bedroom if I had to use the bathroom at night. She told me about this one night when my mom was remodeling the house. I was sleeping over at a friend's, so Jess had to sleep alone in the living room. She said she woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of banging all around the kitchen, like cupboards or drawers slamming. It went on for a bit, then just stopped. When she finally fell asleep again, she had this horrible nightmare. She said in the dream she was being chased around the house by 3 old women, just circling the same rooms over and over, these old women getting closer and closer. Same house, same layout. She woke up terrified. When I was around 11, I had my friend Bree over. My mom wasn't home, and my grandpa, well, we all called him Papa Joe, was supposed to pick us up later so we could stay the night at his place. Bree and I were in my room with the door closed. I was packing an overnight bag, just throwing clothes in, talking about nothing, when we heard it. From the kitchen, this loud stomping. Heavy, fast footsteps. They ran from the kitchen straight down the hallway to my bedroom door, and then stopped. Right outside. Bree and I just stared at each other, eyes huge. I remember whispering, "Nope, nope, we're not doing this." I opened my bedroom window, and the 2 of us climbed out like we were escaping a movie. I called my grandpa from the front yard and asked if he could pick us up earlier. We sat on the porch until his car turned into the driveway, and neither of us went back inside until he was there. Another time when I was about 12, my cousin Tasha came over in the afternoon. It was still light out, around 5. My mom wasn't home again. This is a theme, by the way. And Tasha asked if she could take a shower. I told her, "Yeah, sure, but the extra towels are in my mom's room. You'll have to go in there." Now, I was not going in that bedroom. I would avoid that room at all costs, even during the day. But Tasha didn't really believe in anything spooky, and it was daylight, so I figured she'd be fine. She went down the hallway, turned into my mom's room, and I went back to messing around in my bedroom. Then I heard her scream, like blood-curdling, panicked screaming, followed by the sound of her running. I rushed into the living room just in time to see her bolt out of my mom's room and straight toward the front door. I didn't even ask questions. I just unlocked the door, and we both ran out onto the front porch. She was breathing hard, pointing back at the house, trying to explain what happened. When she finally calmed down, she told me she'd gone into my mom's bathroom, flipped on the light, and in the corner of the room, she saw a tall shadow figure just standing there. Not moving, just there. She said as soon as she realized she was looking at a person-shaped shadow that shouldn't be there, she turned and ran. I told her, "Yeah, no, we are not staying here tonight." We called Papa Joe again, and he took us to his place. Honestly, that became my little survival strategy. If I heard anything too weird while I was alone, I'd just wait out on the porch until someone came home. By the time I was 14, my sister Jess had moved out, but her old room was still there, door usually wide open, dark at night. It got to the point where these things were almost routine. Not normal, but familiar. If it had been every single night, maybe it would have become just an annoyance, but I never completely got used to it. Every time it happened, that same fear would hit. There was this one stretch when my mom went on a trip to visit the guy who eventually became my second stepdad. While she was gone, Jess came back to stay a few nights and drive me to school. The first night she was there, we were in the kitchen loading a bowl into her new little glass bubbler. We were being very responsible teenagers, of course. As we're standing there, we suddenly hear banging coming from her old bedroom. Not a single thump, more like loud knocks against the wall. We looked at each other. She kind of half smiled and said, "Okay, that's probably just Mark mad I'm letting you smoke in his house." We both laughed, shrugged it off, and nothing else happened that night. A little later that year, I had two friends stay over, Bree again, and a newer friend named Rowan. The day was totally normal. We watched movies, ate junk food, the usual. When it got late, I decided I'd be brave and let them take my bedroom while I slept on the couch. Part of me felt like I was being protective, like, if anything weird's gonna happen, better it happens to me than to them. It was around 4 in the morning. I was lying on the couch with my phone, just mindlessly scrolling, when I heard the back door. Open, close. At that point, I was used to that sound. That was Mark's routine, and usually, nothing else came with it. So I ignored it. Then I heard the crinkle and release of a trash bag. It sounded like someone was messing with the garbage in the back room, lifting the bag and letting it drop. Again, I tried to ignore it. I was tired and honestly kind of annoyed. Then the footsteps started. Slow, deliberate steps coming toward the living room. I turned over to face the back of the couch, toward my bedroom door, and shut my eyes. My heart was pounding, but I was stubborn. I was like, I'm not giving this thing the satisfaction of watching me freak out. The footsteps came closer and closer until they stopped right behind the couch. I could feel that same staring sensation again, like we were in some kind of standoff. It probably lasted 10, maybe 15 seconds, but it felt like forever. Then my bedroom door opened. I still didn't move. I just kept my eyes closed. Then I felt someone nudging my shoulder. "Lila, hey, wake up." I opened my eyes and it was Bree. I was honestly shocked it was her and not something else. She climbed onto the couch with me and said, "Something's grabbing my blanket and my feet. It keeps pulling at them. I'm freaked out." I told her as calmly as I could. Yeah, weird stuff happens sometimes. Let's just hang out here. It's usually better when there's more than one person. She said Rowan was still asleep and hadn't noticed anything. I told Bree what had just happened to me with the footsteps and the trash bag, and she got even more freaked out. So we put on Adventure Time and tried to joke a little until the sun came up. The next morning, we asked Rowan if anything happened to her. She said no. Honestly, I got the vibe she thought we were just trying to scare her because she was new. Around that time, my mom let her new partner move in, my second stepdad. Let's call him Eric. He'd been living with us maybe a week when he and I went out to run errands together. We were just driving, listening to the radio, when he glanced over at me and said, "Hey, do you think your house is haunted?" I just about jumped out of the seat. Oh my God, yes! Did you see something? What happened? I was so relieved that an adult might actually believe me. I got chills instantly. I told him, and that is exactly why I avoid that bedroom. I won't go in there alone. There has always been something in there. He told me he'd mentioned it to my mom, and she'd told him he was paranoid, that nothing like that ever happens. Classic. He and I swapped stories the whole ride. Later, after he'd been there a while, he admitted that whenever he walked past Jess's old room, he'd see a shape in the corner of his eye, like a person standing right inside the doorway. Fast forward a bit. I'm older now, but weird things still happen in that house. I refuse, like flat out refuse, to be in there alone. Even when I go over to help my mom clean, I'll do the kitchen, the living room, whatever. But when it's time to clean her bedroom and bathroom, she has to be in there with me. She'll laugh, roll her eyes, say I'm dramatic, but she stays. She sits on the bed scrolling her phone or folding laundry while I do the dusting and vacuuming, and I feel slightly less like I'm going to turn around and see a shadow in the corner. Eric still occasionally tells me about weird stuff that happens when they're there alone. Jess and I still talk about growing up in that creepy house, swapping which memories still make our skin crawl. I know some people don't believe in this stuff, and that's okay. I'm not here to convince anyone. It just felt right to finally say it all out loud, especially in October. So yeah, that was my childhood house, the one I still won't stay in by myself. Happy October! So, this is going to sound made up, especially because it happened on Halloween night of all nights. But I promise you, I'm telling it exactly how I remember it. My name's Emma, and my partner, let's call him Alex, and I live together in this lower ground floor flat in one of those classic British Victorian terraced houses. You know the type. High ceilings, slightly crooked floors, and more creaks than a box of old floorboards. Now, I'll be honest, I'm very suggestible. I do believe in ghosts and the paranormal. I love spooky stories. I watch all the haunted house documentaries, probably not helping myself there. Alex, on the other hand, does not believe in any of that. He's the super rational one. Over time, being with him, I kind of trained myself to brush weird things off. Every odd noise, every strange feeling, I'd just tell myself, it's the pipes, it's the neighbors, it's the wind, calm down. And honestly, nothing truly weird had ever happened in this flat. Just the usual old building stuff. Creaks in the night, radiators making dramatic noises, that sort of thing. So, Halloween night, we stayed up later than we should have. Alex was at his PC with his headphones on, playing some game, and I was curled up on the sofa with a book. We finally went to bed at about 1:30 a.m. because we were both working from home the next day and thought, it's fine, we can sleep in a little. For the past couple of weeks, I've been taking these herbal sleep tablets called Dream Ease to help me get a better night's sleep. They're over the counter, nothing wild, but they do give me some odd, vivid dreams sometimes. Since I struggle to fall asleep and stay asleep, I figured they were worth a try. Not long after I nodded off that night, I got this really strange feeling, like someone was standing over me. You know when you're asleep, but you suddenly become aware of the room? That kind of thing. I thought maybe Alex had woken up to go to the loo or get a drink of water or something. So I opened my eyes. At the end of the bed, there was this human-shaped figure, completely dark, like a silhouette cut out of pitch black. It looked tall, taller than Alex, just standing there at the foot of the bed. At first, my brain did the logical thing. Oh, that's just Alex. Maybe he's looking for his phone or something. But as I tried to really focus on it, I realized I couldn't. It was like trying to bring something into focus when you don't have your glasses on. It was there, but not quite solid. And then this horrible, creeping feeling washed over me. Just wrong. Like the air had gone cold inside my chest. I got so spooked that I squeezed my eyes shut, took a breath, and then forced myself to look again. When I opened my eyes the second time, the big figure wasn't there anymore. But I saw these smaller, shifting shadows in the same area, almost like they were breaking apart and fading away. Little patches of darkness sort of dissolving into the rest of the room. At that point, I told myself, okay, Emma, it's the dreamies. It's just a weird, half-awake dream. You're imagining it. I rolled over, pulled the duvet up, and somehow managed to fall back asleep. A bit later, I don't know how long, maybe an hour, I woke up again with that exact same feeling. Someone was in the room. I didn't hear anything, I just felt it. You know when your skin knows before your brain does? That. But this time, I refused to open my eyes. I was scared, and I also didn't want to feed into it. I literally thought, if I don't look, it'll just go away. It's all in my head. So I stayed perfectly still, eyes closed, heart pounding, and eventually drifted off again. So we're in the kitchen making coffee. The kettle's boiling, the usual slow start to a work-from-home day. And Alex goes, totally casually, I had such a weird night's sleep. I was exhausted and passed out straight away. But then I woke up suddenly because I felt like there was someone in the room. And I just froze. I stared at him and asked, what do you mean, someone in the room? He says, I don't know. It just felt like someone was there, like a presence. I actually sat up and looked around, looked at the door, but there was nothing, so I just went back to sleep. And I swear to you, my whole body went cold. I got full-on chills, because that was exactly how I had felt. So I told him what happened to me. The dark figure at the end of the bed, the smaller shadows, the feeling of someone in the room, and how I'd woken up twice. I also asked him, do you remember roughly what time that was? And he goes, not long after we went to bed, maybe a little after 2? Which is exactly when it happened to me. At that point, I just looked at him like, okay, Mr. Skeptic, explain that. Even he didn't have a neat, logical answer. He tried to. He said maybe we were both half awake and influenced by all the spooky Halloween stuff, or maybe some shared sleep disturbance. But you could see on his face that it unsettled him. To try and comfort me, he said, maybe it was just one of our grandparents checking in on us, making sure we're all right. And I appreciated that. I really did. It was sweet. But the feeling I had that night wasn't comforting. It wasn't warm or protective. It felt heavy and uneasy and dark. Not evil necessarily, just wrong. So now we're both a bit freaked out. I'm sitting there like, are we losing it? Is this some kind of sleep paralysis thing? Was it our brains syncing up in a weird way? Or was it something else? I still don't really know. All I know is that 2 people in the same room on the same night both woke up with the feeling that someone was there who shouldn't have been, and one of us actually saw something. And yes, before you ask, I absolutely went out later that day and bought sage. Whether it's for the vibes, the ritual, or just to make myself feel like I'm doing something, I don't know. But that night, I opened all the windows, lit the sage, and gently but very firmly told anything that wasn't paying rent to kindly get out of our flat. If nothing else, it made me feel a little less powerless. And that's the story of our Halloween night, when the shadows came to visit. So, let me tell you a story. I was born in the Philippines, up in Luzon, the northern part of the islands. My mom was from Laguna, from this small town called Calauan, the one famous for pineapples. My dad's side was from Pangasinan, where there's more salt than you'd think a person could ever need. Salt beds, sea breeze, the works. Now, my family? Very Catholic. Rosaries on rearview mirrors, calendars with saints, the whole package. But even with all the statues and novenas, there was always this quiet understanding that there's more going on than what we see. Old beliefs don't really die, they just learn to whisper. One of my earliest memories, I must have been about 4, is of visiting my mother's village. It was a rushed trip. Usually we'd leave Metro Manila early in the morning and get to Calauan by lunchtime. But that time, everything was scrambled. We left late, got stuck in traffic, and by the time we reached my Lola Nena's house, it was already dark. I remember the air felt heavy, like it knew something I didn't. We barely stayed at the house. We hurried straight to the barangay hall, the community center, because there was something going on. When we got there, the place was full. Not just relatives, but half the town, it felt like. People were quiet, tense. The grown-ups moved like they were carrying invisible weights. Sadness, anger, fear. I was too young to understand any of it. And in a crowd like that, a little kid just becomes background noise. My mom was busy with whatever urgent thing had brought us there. My dad was talking to relatives. Everyone had something to do except me. I was standing near the edge of the crowd when I saw my youngest uncle. Let's call him Tito Ruel. He was barely older than a teenager in my memory, still with that mix of boyish grin and awkward grown-up clothes. He was the only one who really looked at me. "You're bored, no?" he said, smiling. And before I could even answer, he squatted down and offered me his back. "Come on, let's go for a walk." The next thing I remember is sitting on his shoulders, my small hands buried in his thick hair, my cheek resting against the top of his head sometimes. He walked us through the quiet streets of Calauan, playing tour guide like he'd practiced the role. "That's the church," he said, lifting my hand to point. "That's where we used to skip catechism and play outside." We passed the town's pineapple statue, the one that looked both proud and slightly ridiculous in the middle of the plaza. We went down those tree-lined streets where houses sat shoulder to shoulder, like old neighbors gossiping. On either side of the road, there were these stone-lined canals, open gutters really, where water trickled along. I remember leaning over from his shoulders, fascinated, seeing these tiny frogs and snails in the water. "When I was your age," he told me, "there used to be little fish in there. We try to catch them for fun. Now, just these guys." I don't actually remember the walking part very clearly. What I remember is the feeling of being carried. His hands on my ankles so I wouldn't fall. The way he'd reach up, take my hand, and point at things like a tour guide who was proud of his little town. Eventually, we went back to the community center. The lights were harsh. The air was stuffy with incense and sweat and whispers. Tito Ruel lifted me off his shoulders and set me down near the doorway. He said something like, "Okay, go to your mom now." And just like that, he melted back into the crowd. "Where did you go?" she demanded. She was not the eldest sibling, but she was the one everyone listened to, and someone was supposed to have been watching me. I told her, very matter-of-factly, I was with Tito Ruel. He showed me the town. I don't remember their exact faces, but I do remember the mood shift. confusion, then this sort of tightness. They thought I was making up stories, trying to avoid getting scolded for wandering off. Anyway, it was late. They finally brought me inside. I remember the central room, packed with relatives and neighbors. At the front, surrounded by flowers and candles, was a wooden box. I didn't know the word for it then. Later, I'd learn it was called a coffin. I walked closer, curious, and there he was. My Uncle Ruel, lying very still, hands folded, dressed neatly like he was going to church. His face looked calm, like he was just sleeping. I tugged at someone's hand, I think it was my aunt's, and asked, "Why is Tito Ruel sleeping there? I was just with him." That was the night someone first explained death to me. They told me he was gone, that what I'd seen in the coffin was his body, but that he himself, his soul, his spirit, however they phrased it, was already with God. But all I could think was, he had just walked me around town. He had just carried me on his shoulders. He had just pointed out the church and the pineapple and the frogs in the gutter. Looking back, maybe my little brain just wanted him so badly to still be there that it stitched together something comforting. Or maybe, and I'm just telling you how it felt, maybe he saw me standing alone and decided to give me one last tour. The next day we had the funeral. There was a church service, then a slow walk to the cemetery. It was my first time in a graveyard. The path we took between the tombs felt familiar. I recognized some turns, some corners, like I'd already walked them the night before, on his shoulders. I remember my family crying at the grave, and me just standing there, not fully grasping what never again meant. I didn't understand that from that moment on, no matter how many new babies were born or who married into the family, in my mind, it would always feel like we were becoming fewer. That was my mother's side. My father's side was different. He came from land. Not so much piles of cash, but hectares of it, fields and orchards. Land is its own kind of power. I was more afraid of my dad than close to him when I was a kid. My mom was home, softness, warmth. My father was thunder. But one time, they took me to visit his parents, way out where his family name came from. And like always, I wandered off. I didn't know anyone there. Looking back, most of our trips were probably to my mom's side of the family, or I was just too young to remember his. There are old photo albums of me even tinier than in this story, smiling on beaches in Mindanao, and I have zero memory of the plane rides or any of it. Anyway, my grandparents' place on my dad's side sat near this big expanse of green, different kind of trees than in Laguna. They were laid out in these odd, almost geometric rows, but behind them rose a thicker, wilder wall of forest. I would learn later that the neat rows were our family's orchard. Back then, I just saw trees and thought, adventure. So I slipped away. You'd think I'd be scared, but I wasn't. No matter how dark it got between the trunks, I could always see slices of the sky above, the pale shape of the sun filtered through the leaves. It felt like the jungle itself was, I don't know, watching out for me, not stalking me. Eventually, the trees began to thin out. The ground got sandier under my feet. The smell changed, less earth, more salt. Then suddenly, I was on a beach. White sand, not the grayish kind you get near a busy port, but the soft, almost powdery kind that squeaks under your toes. The sea in front of me was a greenish blue, and the sky above it was this endless dome of light. The only man-made thing there, aside from me, was a wooden cross. Not polished or fancy like the ones in church, just two rough beams tied together, planted near the edge of the sand. I didn't go near it. Even as a kid, I knew better than to mess with crosses in the middle of nowhere. I was already somewhere I probably wasn't supposed to be. I didn't know how to swim yet, so I stayed close to shore. I let the waves chase my feet, running back and forth, going only knee-deep when I felt particularly brave. I don't know how long I played like that, but kids have a special talent for losing time when they're happy. Then the sun started to dip, the light turning more golden and slanting across the water, and that's when it hit me. I did it again, I thought. I'd wandered off. They were going to be furious. I turned back toward the line of trees and realized I had absolutely no idea which path I'd taken. For a moment, my fear of getting lost wrestled with my fear of getting yelled at. But eventually the fear of my dad's anger won. So I took a deep breath and walked back into the trees anyway. The forest I went into did not feel like the same forest I came out of. Before, everything had been curiosity and wonder. Now every crack of a twig made me jump. Every patch of shadow looked too dark. I couldn't see my own footprints. I had no idea where home was from here. But whenever I froze, not sure whether to go left or right, I would get this pull. Not a voice, not a light, just a feeling that something, someone, further in was saying, "This way." So I'd look up. The sun was still up there somewhere, a pale promise through the leaves. I'd look down, and somehow, there was always a thin gap in the plants that could be a path if I decided to believe it was. So I followed those little invitations. Walk a bit. Stop. Feel that tug again. Adjust. Walk some more. Eventually, the wildness softened. Order returned. I stepped out between two rows of trees and realized I was back in the orchard, just a few lines away from where I'd started my adventure. I ran back to my grandparents' house, heart pounding, legs tired, sand still clinging to my ankles. The adults were frantic. Some relatives had already gone out looking for me. My grandmother grabbed me and checked me over, like I might have grown a second head while I was away. I, being a very straightforward little kid, blurted out, "I didn't know we were so rich we had our own beach." They just stared at me. The next day, we piled into vehicles and drove around town. They wanted to show me where the family name came from. I pressed my face to the window, looking for that quiet beach. There wasn't one. We drove further north and finally hit the real coastline. There were boats, people, houses, noise. It wasn't empty at all, but the curve of the land, the way the shore bent left and right, felt eerily similar to the beach where I'd been playing the day before. Growing up, I heard classmates and relatives talk about spirits and unseen things like they were always evil. Demons, tricksters, things to be afraid of. And I get it. A lot of people have stories where those things don't feel kind. But for me, as strange as it sounds, I never felt hunted. I felt watched over. If not loved, then at least guided. Years later, I moved to America. The landscapes changed. Pine forests instead of jungles. Mountains and lakes instead of rice fields and mango trees. Every now and then, out on a hike or sitting alone in some quiet park, I'd feel a familiar presence in the rustle of leaves or the way sunlight found me through branches. It was gentler there, quieter, or maybe I had already learned to doubt myself by then. The older I got, the more I tried to explain things away, to file them under memory glitches, childhood imagination, coincidence. It felt safer to trust logic than to admit that maybe, just maybe, something had reached out to me in those in-between spaces. But when I really sit with those memories, my uncle's shoulders under my hands, the hidden beach at the end of the orchard, the invisible guidance in the trees, I don't think about horror stories. I think about how, in the moments when I was small and lost and alone, I never truly felt abandoned. Whatever it was, memory, spirit, imagination, grace, I felt accompanied. And that feeling has stayed with me, even when I pretend it hasn't. Okay, so, let me just tell this to you like I would if we were sitting on the couch together. My brother, I'll call him Leo, was 17 when he passed away really suddenly. It was one of those moments where your whole life gets ripped in half in a single day. And Leo, man, he was obsessed with this one video game. It was his comfort place, his happy place, his stay up way too late and yell at the TV place. You know the type. After he died, me and my sister, Nora, started playing that same game a lot more. At first, it was just to feel close to him, like we were stepping into his little world for a bit. Over time, it just became our thing. We'd hop on at night, run some matches, talk about him, laugh about his old rage quits. It was kind of our way of keeping him in the room. So, last night, we were playing duos, that's teams of 2, and we'd only been in the match for maybe 2 minutes. We dropped way out on the edge of the map, deliberately away from everyone else. It was super quiet. No footsteps, no shots, nothing. Just us. And then we start hearing this sound. It was like this relentless buzzing and slashing, kind of like someone revving a chainsaw and swinging it over and over. At first, I thought maybe it was some new item or a glitch, but it just would not stop. Over and over and over, this loud slash. It was so out of place because there was supposedly no one anywhere near us. So naturally, we're laughing and confused, like, "Do you hear that?" "Yeah, where the hell is that coming from?" We start searching. We check behind rocks, around buildings, inside rooms, out in the field. Nothing. No footsteps on the visual radar, no shots, no enemies. Just this looping chainsaw swing sound that seemed to be right on top of us and nowhere at the same time. Later, when we watched the replay, we figured out there was someone. They were literally standing on the roof above us, on the very top edge, just hacking at the air with this saw-type tool. Perfectly still, just swinging, not moving, not looting, not doing anything that made sense. But in the moment, we had no idea. All we knew was creepy noise, nowhere to be found. This went on for, I swear, close to 10 minutes. 10 minutes in an online match is a long time to just stand there and swing a tool. Most people would get bored or third-partied by then. Finally, out of nowhere, this boy character jumps down off the roof and lands right next to Nora. Doesn't attack, doesn't build, doesn't shoot. Just stands there, facing her, like he'd been trying to get our attention the entire time. And of course, her reflexes kick in. She freaks out and blasts him because, we're in a match. This is what you do. As soon as she does, we both just kind of go quiet. And then we start joking, trying to shake it off. Watch that be Leo, trolling us from the afterlife. Yeah, that would be exactly his sense of humor. Because here's the thing. Ever since he died, weird stuff has been happening around us. Lights turning on by themselves, especially in his old room. Random things getting knocked over with no one nearby. Cereal boxes, stuff off shelves, little things that make you stop and go, okay, that's odd. We've always half joked, half believed it was him messing with us. Like he never really stopped being the little brother who loved to startle us for fun. I went to check the player's profile. And that's when my stomach dropped. The username included my brother's first name. Not something super common either. Not like John or Mike. It was his name. Clear as day. I just stared at it for a second, and then I told Nora. We both looked at each other like, no way. We kept repeating, "You've got to be kidding me." Now, here's the thing. It wasn't his old username. The one we knew from when he was alive was different. So logically, okay, maybe some random kid out there just happens to have the same name in their tag. But then it got weirder. A little later, me and Nora were scrolling through the recently played with list, just messing around, still talking about how bizarre the whole thing was. And there it was. His real username. The exact one he used when he was alive, on our recently played with list. According to the game, we had played with him a couple of days ago. I just froze. It's like my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. I kept refreshing, backing out, going back in, but it was there, clear as day. His exact name, recent match. I cannot even explain the feeling that washed over me. It was like being yanked back to the day we lost him. All the shock, the confusion, the "this can't be happening" feeling. Later that night, I was on Messenger with my friend, I'll call her Tara, telling her the whole story. The chainsaw sound, the lonely player, the name, the recent matches. I was typing it all out, and while I was doing that, I had this cold, tingly feeling at the back of my scalp. Goosebumps everywhere. The air around me felt heavy and cold at the same time. Tara messages back and says something like, "I really think that was Leo saying hi. That sounds exactly like him." And the second she sends that, her entire phone screen suddenly turns black and white. Not just dimmed or glitched, full grayscale. She thought it was weird enough that she grabbed her kid's phone and took a picture of it, then sent that to me as proof. After she restarted the phone, the color went back to normal. Meanwhile, I'm just sitting there with that frozen feeling, wrapped up in this cold, electric kind of air. You know that feeling when you know you're not alone in the room, even if you can't see anyone? Like the air itself is watching you. That's what it felt like. And this isn't the first time I've felt him around. Right after he died, they gave me a box with some of his things from the scene. I had the box in one of the rooms at home. That night, I started hearing noises in there. Soft shuffling, like someone moving around, things lightly brushing or being nudged. At first, I told myself it was the house settling, or the heater, or something stupid and normal. But the sound kept going. Then the dread kicked in. Not just fear, dread. Like this heavy, panicky feeling that wasn't even mine. It was almost like I could hear his thoughts in my own head. Stuff like, "Oh my God, what happened? This can't be real. This can't be happening to me." It felt like I was suddenly sharing his shock and terror from the moment everything went wrong. It was so intense that I could not stay in the house. I grabbed my keys and left, and stayed somewhere else that night because I just couldn't handle being there with that box and those feelings. Look, I'm not saying I have the answers. I know there are rational explanations. Accounts can be hacked, usernames can glitch, data can get weird. I even contacted the game company before, asking about how usernames work. They told me usernames can't just be reassigned, deleted, or reused after inactivity. They're basically locked once they're taken. So yeah, technically, maybe someone got into his account somehow. But think about it. This is one of the biggest games on the planet, with thousands and thousands of people online constantly. The odds that, out of all the people playing at that exact moment, we'd end up matched with an account that has his exact old username, and another one with his actual name in it, while joking about him, while hearing that weird sound, while being totally isolated on the map. I don't know. It feels like too much to chalk up to coincidence. So I keep circling back to the same question in my head. Was that our brother, just dropping into our match to say, "Hey, I'm still here. I'm still playing with you"? I don't know for sure. But I'll tell you this. The way the air felt, the timing of everything, the names, the phone glitch, the recently played with list, it all felt like him. And honestly, even if I never get a logical explanation, a part of me hopes it was Leo. Because the idea of him logging on one more time just to mess with us, just to make us laugh and freak out and feel him close again, that actually brings me a weird kind of peace. So, my dad died pretty suddenly. It was October of last year. He was 62 and I was 29. One day he was just there, making dumb jokes and asking if I'd eaten yet, and then, heart attack. He was gone. I still trip over that sentence when I say it out loud. For some context, my dad, his name was Ray, and I were both very 420 friendly. That was kind of our little thing. Please don't judge us too harshly for it. We weren't trying to escape life. Honestly, some of my favorite memories are us splitting an edible, putting on some ridiculous comedy, and just laughing until we cried. It felt like this safe little world where it was just me and him. My mom, Carla, struggled with alcoholism when I was a kid, so a lot of the time it was just my dad and me against the world. I was his kid, his shadow. He made my lunches, showed up to every school thing, tried way too hard to understand TikTok just so we had something new to talk about. We were close. Since he passed, I've begged for some kind of sign from him. Nights where I just lay there in the dark, whispering, "Please, Dad, something, anything. Just let me know you're still around." But for a whole year, nothing. No dreams, no weird coincidences, just silence and grief. Then last night happened. So I made a dumb mistake. I tried a new THC gummy I'd never had before. I thought I was being careful. I only took one, but it was way stronger than I expected. Like way too strong. Within an hour, I started greening out. My heart was racing. My skin felt like it was buzzing, and I honestly thought I was going to die. I was lying on my bed, staring at the ceiling, absolutely miserable. My thoughts were looping like, "Please let this pass. Please let me come down. I don't want to feel like this. Just make it stop." I wasn't talking out loud at first. It was all in my head. And right as I'm silently begging for it to end, the overhead fan in my bedroom turns on. Now, this fan is annoying, actually. It doesn't have pull cords. There's no wall switch for it. The only way to turn it on is with this little remote that looks like a cheap TV remote. You have to press an actual button. The remote was not in my room. Like, I knew exactly where it was, on the kitchen counter under yesterday's mail. No one else was home. The fan just clicked on all by itself and started spinning. At first I thought, okay, I'm really too high. This is it. I'm hallucinating. But then, instantly, there was this presence in the room. That's the only way I can describe it. It felt like the air got thicker, but not in a scary way. Just full, warm, heavy with meaning. And I knew it was my dad. I just started sobbing. Not cute crying, ugly, shaking, can't catch my breath crying. And I actually said out loud into the empty room, "Dad, is that you? Are you here with me? Are you okay, wherever you are? Am I going to see you again?" My voice sounded so small. I felt like a little kid again, scared in the dark, reaching out for him. Right then, this wave of warmth rolled over me. My heart started pounding, harder than it ever has in my life. It wasn't like a panic attack, though. I've had those. Panic feels cold and sharp. This felt huge, like my chest couldn't contain it. There was no voice, no words, just this overwhelming feeling that every question I just asked, the answer was yes. Yes, it was him. Yes, he was there with me. Yes, I would see him again. And here's the weird part. As soon as that intensity hit its peak, the fan spinning above me, my heart racing, tears everywhere, my high started to back off, like someone turned a dimmer switch down. Within a few minutes, I went from, "I'm going to die, I'm never coming back from this," to this strange, clear calm. My thoughts stopped racing. The nausea eased up. I was still high, but I wasn't terrified anymore. I could breathe again. All I could think was, he heard me. He showed up. He helped me come down. I have his ashes in that room, by the way. They're in this dark blue urn on top of a little shelf, along with some of his favorite things. His old watch, the hat he wore every time he grilled, a faded concert ticket he swore was from the best night of his life. I was lying just a few feet away from all of that. So I'm there, on the bed, fan spinning, tears all over my face, hands shaking. I stayed like that for another 15 minutes at least, just whispering thank you over and over. I felt wrung out, but also held, like I wasn't alone. Now look, I completely understand that some people are going to say, it was just the weed. Your brain was freaking out and created a comforting story. And maybe that's true. Maybe it was all chemicals and anxiety and coincidence. But here's my truth. It didn't feel like that. Not even a little. I've been too high before. I know what paranoia and hallucinations feel like. This was different. This was focused, comforting. It felt like my dad knew I was scared and did the one thing he could think of to make me feel better. Turned on the fan, cooled me down, and sat with me until it passed. And it wasn't just that night that's made me feel like he's still hanging around. My mom, Carla, has 2 cats, Luna and Pepper. These cats are like the definition of, you may look at me from afar. They're not cuddly. They barely tolerated us, honestly. If they let you pet them twice in a row, it was a miracle. But around the 1-year mark of my dad's death, they started acting strange. Almost right after the anniversary, they suddenly turned into little shadows. They follow my mom everywhere, curl up on her chest when she lies down, sit next to her on the couch, pressed right up against her like little furry heating pads. This is not normal behavior for them, at all. My mom keeps saying, half joking, Ray must have told them to keep an eye on me. And every time Luna curls up on my lap too, something she never used to do, I get that same little feeling in my chest. Like he's nudging them toward us, like, go on, they need you. Take care of my girls for me. Maybe it's just grief making patterns out of nothing. Maybe the cats are just getting older and softer. Maybe the fan glitched. Maybe the remote got bumped somehow. But I know how that moment felt. I know how suddenly the fear drained out of me. I know how I went from spiraling to safe, just like when I was a kid and my dad would sit on the edge of my bed, rub my back, and tell me everything was going to be okay. Before last night, I wasn't sure what I believed about the afterlife. I kind of floated in that space of, I don't know, I hope there's something. Now, I still don't have answers, like big picture answers. I don't know what exactly happens when we die, but I do believe this. Whatever's waiting for us, whatever it looks like, wherever it is, my dad is there. He's okay. And somehow, in some way I don't have the language for, he's still able to look out for me now and then. I believe I'll see him again. That belief feels less like a wish and more like a quiet, steady knowing. My dad, still being my dad, still taking care of me. Still finding a way to say, hey kiddo, I've got you. Breathe. You're going to be okay. You know, I'm still not totally sure how to explain this, but I'm pretty sure I met an angel once. So last September, I moved to Maui completely on my own. No grand plan, no safety net. I'd been living in Chicago, working this corporate marketing job that looked good on paper, but made me feel empty. I remember sitting at my desk one day, staring at spreadsheets and thinking, if I don't leave now, I'm going to wake up 10 years from now and still feel this stuck. So I did it. I sold most of my stuff, packed what was left into 2 suitcases, and moved to Hawaii. I only knew one person on the island, an old coworker who had moved out there a year before. That was it. The transition was rough. There were days I'd wake up in this ridiculously beautiful place and still feel so lonely and scared. I'd walk along the water at sunrise and wonder, what am I even doing here? What am I looking for? I questioned everything, my choices, my future, whether I'd just made a huge mistake. One afternoon, I went to this local park to play pickleball. It became my little escape, a way to meet people and not spiral in my own thoughts. I remember the sun was starting to dip a bit, the sky that soft gold, and the courts were buzzing with casual games and laughter. While I was waiting for my turn, this man walked up to me. He was a black man, tall, maybe late 30s, with the lightest gray-blue eyes I've ever seen. They were almost silver. He had this gentle energy about him, calm, kind, but very present, if that makes sense. Like he was really there with you when he looked at you. He smiled and said hi, and we started chatting the way you do with strangers at a park. Where are you from? How long have you been here? That kind of thing. And then everything got weird. Out of nowhere, he looks at me and goes, "You're from the Chicago area, right? Near Logan Square, on the corner of Kedzie and Armitage?" I just froze, because that was exactly where my old apartment was. Not kinda near, not in that general neighborhood, the exact intersection. I must have gone quiet because he just sort of smiled, like he knew he'd surprised me. Then he goes, "You've got 3 brothers." I laughed and said, "No, I only have 1 brother." He tilted his head, still calm, and said, "No, you have 3. 1 by blood, 2 by marriage." And that's when it hit me. I do have 1 biological brother and 2 stepbrothers, but I never think of the stepbrothers right away because I hardly ever see them. It honestly didn't even cross my mind until he said it again. I remember this little chill going down my spine. I hadn't told him anything about my family. Nothing. Then he looks at me and says, "You're Polish, right? Very close with your mom." And that part? That made my chest tighten a bit. Because I am Polish, and my mom is like my best friend. We talk almost every day. I hadn't mentioned that either. Every detail he said was just true. There was no vague guessing, no fishing like psychics sometimes do. It was specific, precise, too precise. For a second, my brain went to the weirdest places. I thought, is this guy a stalker? Did he somehow look me up on social media? But I couldn't make any of it make sense. There was nothing about our short conversation that could have given him that much information. He must have seen the confusion on my face because he kind of chuckled softly and said, "Don't worry, I'm not following you. I just get these things. I have a sense about certain people. You were meant to talk to me today." And the wildest thing was, I believed him. At that point, I hadn't told him that I'd quit my job, or that I was quietly panicking about money, about my future, about whether I'd completely sabotaged my life. I was carrying all that around in my head, but I hadn't said a word. And then he keeps going. He says, "You're going to meet your person soon. You'll be married at 27. You'll have 3 kids, 2 girls and a boy." For context, I'm 24, and I'd been worrying about all of that. Love, marriage, whether I'd ever find a partner, whether I'd even want kids by the time I got there. These are the things I was staying up late at night thinking about, turning over and over in my mind. But hearing it from him, I don't know, it didn't feel creepy. It didn't feel like someone trying to mess with me. It felt calming, almost like someone had quietly opened a window in a stuffy room. I didn't feel afraid of him at all. Instead, I felt this deep sense of peace settle over me. Like, for the first time in months, I was exactly where I was supposed to be, standing next to this stranger on a random pickleball court in Maui. We talked a little longer. I asked him what his name was, and he said, "My name's Micah." When it was finally my turn to play, I thanked him and started to walk toward the court. As we wrapped up, he said something like, "I'm always around. You'll see me again." I remember those words so clearly. I'm always around. I walked maybe 10, 15 steps away, and then I got that feeling. You know, when you suddenly want to look back, just to make sure something actually happened. So I turned around to glance back at him. He was gone. Not blended into the crowd, not walked over to the parking lot, just gone. The courts were fully fenced in, the kind of chain link you can see straight through. There wasn't really anywhere to disappear to that quickly without me noticing. If he'd walked toward the gate, I would have seen him. If he'd cut across the grass, I would have seen him. But there was nothing, no sign of him at all. I kept playing at those courts. I went back a lot, actually, partly for the games and partly because a very real part of me hoped I'd see him again. I'd catch myself scanning the people as I walked in, looking for those silver blue eyes, that calm energy, that gentle smile. I never saw him again. To this day, it's one of the most surreal, unexplainable moments of my life. I still think about it all the time. Whenever I start doubting myself, or my path, or whether I'm doing life right, I remember standing on that court with Micah, feeling completely seen by a stranger who knew things he shouldn't have been able to know. And whether he was an actual angel or just a human being with a strange gift, I don't know. But I do know this. In that moment, it felt like the universe reached out, put a hand on my shoulder, and whispered, "You're okay. Keep going. You're exactly where you need to be."